a bitch.
That suit is way too tight.
Is it that noticeable?
That hog is visible from Jotunheim.
We'll just fix it in post.
No, we won't. I am burdened with a gloriously small budget. You need to watch and explain every movie from Phase 1 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or you'll never get the budget you need to make this video look even half decent.
Everybody's such a stickler about money.
This is America, grow up.
You're right. I'm sorry.
Speaking of manned or unmanned, you gotta get him to tell you about the time he guessed wrong at spring break.
Weirdly, the first thing the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe shows us is the Paramount logo. We do then get the classic Marvel title card, but without the ba 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 ba. It's unsettling. Anyway, immediately we're in the Afghani desert listening to Back in Black, even though like everybody's wearing tan. Oh, and also, there are some goats and shit. Because Afghanistan sucks, am I right? This released only 7 years after 9/11, and Marvel appears to still be cashing in on the ill will by depicting everything as under development. Blow them up, I say.
I couldn't have called that.
But for a literal direct contrast, we hop inside a Humvee to meet an all-American man named Anthony Tony Stark, chugging scotch because he's rich and from a land that is free and rich, like God intended.
We ought to have a prayer called the damn it prayer.
Then he confirms he has sex with all the models, and that now that he's realized one of the soldiers in the vehicle with him is a woman,
Good God, you're a woman.
he'd very much like to have sex with her too.
But you have actually excellent bone structure there. I'm kind of...
Almost certain raging gonorrhea aside, he does seem like a nice guy because he allows one of the soldiers to take a photo with him, though he does admonish him.
I don't want to see this on your MySpace page.
Because that's how old these movies are. Then the Humvee explodes. I mean, not Tony's Humvee. Something worse happens in his. The girl soldier gets shot right in the boobs. Is there nothing sacred?
God damn them.
This is why we went to war in the first place.
You seem upset.
I'm freaking pissed, man.
The breast and bullet-free soldiers hop out, and they get shot, and then Tony himself exits the vehicle as exploded by a missile that has his name on it. He doesn't die, though, because he's secretly wearing a Kevlar vest that also protects his face. He's captured by the tit-shooting terrorists before we cut to 36 hours earlier because this story began en media res. It's somewhere my AP Lit teacher just rolled over in his grave, unless he's alive, and then he probably rolled over Edgar Allan Poe's grave, or in bed. I hope he's sleeping okay.
While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly came a tapping.
Anyway, we get a bunch of Tony's backstory relayed by some pre-roll at a Las Vegas Apogee Awards? Apogee? You know how that's pronounced? Never been nominated. The TLDRs, he's a genius. His dad built weapons and Tony does the same. Then a dude named Rhodes comes up to present the award for biggest, bestest brain for killing Tony. Ah, crap. Tony ain't there. So Tony's bald, second in command, old daddy friend, Obadiah Stane, accepts the award on his behalf. And speaking of crap, Tony is doing those. And when Rhodes finds Tony, Rhodes is like, ah, man, that sucked, dude. I thought we were cool, man. What the heck? And Tony tries to get Rhodes to blow him, but Rhodes says no, so he gets some hot lady to blow him, but it still doesn't work out. Oh, also look, it's the director of the movie, and basically every Disney thing ever created ever since.
Yeah, well, they're all skanks.
Outside, Tony is accosted by the mom from C-Spot Run, or the butt stuff wife from The League, depending on your preferences.
So that's a finger.
And she's like, hey man, bombs are bad. And Tony's like, well, as soon as there's peace in the world, I build baby hospitals. And she's like, I still think you suck. And he's like, well, I also build medical tech and something called IntelliCrops, which if I'm not mistaken means sentient corn. Like corn that can say puns. And the idea of smart and mildly witty corn is so enticing to this woman that she performs the most aggressive sex I've seen put to celluloid on top of Tony and his Iron Man, which I'm gonna assume is the name of his penis, because so far it's the only thing in this movie though where the title applies.
Oh my God.
The next day, Spot's mom wakes up and we realize Tony's house is in Malibu, which means they had to blue ball it all the way from Nevada in the middle of the night, which is impressive. Or they had sex more than once, like on the plane or whatever, but that's like so impossible to be borderline superheroic in and of itself. Sex robot, sex robot. Also, it turns out that the founder of Goop, here named Pepper Potts, cleaned the nice lady's clothes and then calls her literal trash because the idea of using sex to get revenge on uppity women who question your war crimes adjacent business was a lot funnier in 2008.
Will that be all?
In the basement, Tony listens to the one Suicidal Tendencies song everybody knows from Guitar Hero because Tony be bussin', no cap. And he, yeah, I'm pretty cool. Now that I got my own channel, I'm doing cool shit.
Sometimes I try to do things and it just doesn't work out the way I want it to.
Pepper comes downstairs and mentions it's her birthday and that she stole some of Tony's money to buy herself a present. And Tony's like, that probably makes sense. This is probably a foretaste of a future betrayal. Then Tony races to a plane where Rhodes is again kind of upset because he's been waiting, and we realize that he is a military liaison to Tony. As in, I guess, when Tony wants to ask if the military is interested in a way to murder goat people, Rhodes is there to say, hooah, or whatever they say in his military branch. Tony gets Rhodes drunk and forces all the stewardesses on the plane to do a striptease because that's what geniuses do. They build bombs, they bang babes, and they shuck corn that feels pain and wish that they spent more time with their families. We're finally back in Afghanistan, and Tony shows a bunch of military dudes a missile system he created called Jericho that's so good at killing
The bad guys won't even want to come out of their caves.
because, again, suck it, non-Westerners. Ba-bow!
That's how Dad did it.
He fires a mommy missile that splits into a bunch of baby missiles and blows so hard all the colonels and majors cream their pants.
That's how America does it.
In all honesty, what is the point of this weapon? If the enemy is seriously in caves, then pretty much any bomb will do, and if not, where are you hoping to fire this? Because I guarantee the main thing a weapon of this scale will achieve is sparking a massive new recruitment of insurgents. Nobody in country is going to be thankful you killed a maybe terrorist while also leveling 7 innocent city blocks.
And it's worked out pretty well so far.
Tony receives a booty call from an apparently fully nude Jeff Bridges on an LG branded cell phone. Talk about a big Lebowski.
You see what happened?
Tony and the others hop in Humvees, but Tony is a complete asshole to Rhodes and forces him to ride in another Humvee because Tony's is the
Funvee.
and they get exploded. And the goat terrorists who capture Tony perform honestly unbelievably sophisticated heart surgery on him. Tony wakes up with a shitty tube in his nose and imprisoned with another man shaving who is dressed kind of fancy for a cave prisoner. And the fancy boy says, hey bro, you're hooked up to a car battery because I installed a magnet in your chest to keep shrapnel from moving closer to your heart. I guess that Kevlar vest protects faces, but not hearts. That is an interesting trade-off. Apparently, this other dude is another captured scientist named Jensen, who was apparently just around. The terrorists want Tony to build a cave version of the Jericho missile he just sold to America, and to aid him in his quest, they show him a bunch of Stark-branded weaponry that they have lying around their camp. You know, Tony, in my opinion, if you insist on keeping your logo on your bombs, at least make it rainbowed like Raytheon. Also, it's a little weird to ask a guy to build an unbelievably complicated missile for you. What are the odds that he doesn't, A, blow himself and or you up, or B, install some kind of Rogue One backdoor that causes it to malfunction at an inopportune moment?
Traitor.
It's way too complex of a product for any of your people to vet, so there are a million ways it could be sabotaged. Would they even be able to operate it if he makes it?
No, he won't. No, he won't.
Whatever. These are terrorists, and they're apparently called the 10 Rings because they're cool and scary terrorists. Not lame ones like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or QAnon. They actually put some effort into their naming. Alternates left on the table were presumably Dragon Force and the Superpower Team. But first things first, Tony builds himself a newer, cooler heart magnet battery and also designs plans for some battle armor. That's cool and all, but the terrorists should probably have guessed that the real Jericho missile probably doesn't have legs. And again, Tony could have just designed regular missiles and shot those at the bad guys, but Incredible Missile Boy just doesn't have the same ring to it, you know?
Yes.
A new big mean terrorist boss comes in and gives a monologue about how Genghis Khan conquered a bunch of people with his advanced bows and arrows tech. And then I guess that the Jericho missile will be like that, but also, no, it won't. Warfare is insanely complicated compared to when Khan was running around dying of nosebleeds. They say that Tony has until tomorrow to develop the weapon, and Tony immediately gets to work, gratifying us with the MCU's first recorded sexy beefcake sweatshot. Drop that anvil on my head, Wiley. Did you like that, Dave? Anyway, Tony mostly finishes the suit and puts one of those golden eye proximity mines on the door to blow up a couple of terrorists. But he still needs a little more time to fully power up. So Yeltsin grabs an assault rifle and just starts... we made it pretty far before I burped. So he just starts shooting the cave ceiling 6 inches above his forehead and just running down the hallway. Not the most effective strategy, but I guess they don't teach combat strategy at scientist school. Iron Baby finally wakes up and the movie transitions to slight horror vibes as Tony goes full Darth Vader on the terrorists, throwing their asses around like rebel scum.
I don't like scum.
There's also one hilarious moment where a guy accidentally shoots himself in the goddamned head. Wacky! The whole scene is scored with the Call of Dutyest orchestral butt rock that 2008 had to offer. Predictably, the scientist is eventually shot, but it's cool because his family is already dead.
My family's dead.
And this was his plan all along. I wish we knew more about who the hell this guy was and why and when he was captured and from where, but he's not a rich American dude, so I also don't give a shit.
It's okay.
Speaking of, though, he pulls a Tom Hanks and tells Tony to earn it, even though he wouldn't have to earn it if Yeltsin had bothered to fire from cover. Tony heads outside and flamethrowers everybody to death before flying away from the resultant explosion. It doesn't work perfectly, but it's insane that his suit works at all. Like, I get that he's smart, but he's actively developed a dozen brand new technologies while in a cave. My theory is that it's like that episode of Seinfeld where George becomes a genius because he stops thinking about sex all the time.
Absolute zero.
That's Tony in his sexless cave. Make him a eunuch and he could probably have a colony on the moon by Thursday. There's probably an Elon Musk joke in there too.
Yeah, he has so many kids though, Elon Musk.
Yeah, but does he? Maybe he's just growing those kids in a vat. It's like a cover. He's like, I'm having sex.
Like, truly stupendous amount of thinking has gone into sex.
Anyway, Tony crawls out of his iron wreckage and wanders through the desert all babushka looking until he's saved by American helicopters. He throws them the peace sign, which is maybe a throwback to that soldier kid who died at the beginning, or maybe K-pop stands. No! Tony is delivered back to Freedom Land via cargo plane, which brings up a few questions like, is there no way to get off a cargo plane other than the huge ramp? Is there no door for passengers? Because they only ever use the big-ass door in movies. Tony immediately demands a cheeseburger and a sexy press conference so he can talk about some of the fun things he's learned in the past 3 months.
That's enough of that.
As a compromise, Tony eats a Burger King cheeseburger because that's the closest tasting thing to something a terrorist would feed you in a cave.
Whopper, 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 whopper.
And then he makes all the press reporters sit down so they can see him while he speaks and, desperately tries not to shit Burger King all over himself.
Hey, would it be all right if everyone sat down?
Tony claims that he's learned his lesson and he wants to shut down the weapons division over at Stark Industries. It's unclear if the sentient corn division is affected by this decision. Also, this dude named Phil Coulson claims that he's from a government division called Strategic Hazard Intervention Espionage Logistics Directorate.
That's quite a mouthful.
And he needs to debrief Tony. But apparently, it's one of those governmental agencies that's easy to blow off. Like the IRS! You'll never catch me! I hope.
I know. We're working on it.
This announcement causes Obadiah to freak out because the weapons division is what pays for the cigars that he smokes while riding Segways, but Tony doesn't even care. Obadiah asks Tony what else the company can even do, and it's like, dude, anything.
Junior, double, triple, whopper.
Tony is an actual genius. It'll work out. I hear pivoting to video works pretty good. As a sort of example, Tony creates an even better heart magnet, but hasn't quite cracked how to replace the thing without killing himself. So he enlists the help of Pepper, even though she's apparently never heard of the extremely popular board game Operation.
What's Operation? What do you mean Operation?
It's just a game, never mind.
Anyway, she does fine and doesn't kill Tony before the film's 1 hour mark.
Caleb is dead.
Tony, in much better spirits, hits Rhodes with a spicy trans joke.
Speaking of manned or unmanned, you got to get him to tell you about the time he guessed wrong at spring break. That lovely lady you woke up with, what was his name?
And then Rhodes poutily demands Tony make more ways to murder things for America, calling him a bad friend for not letting him do all the murders that he wants. For America.
What, you humanitarian now or something?
Tony eventually takes that to magnet heart because even though he said he's no longer building weapons, he heads down to his lab and immediately begins building one of the craziest weapons of all time.
You're about to make a whole lot of people around here real happy.
He does this with the help of his British robot/butler/partner, Jarvis, which stands for just a really very intelligent system. Because in this world, they come up with the fun acronyms first and then figure out what the hell they stand for later. Simultaneously, the Ten Rings leader, sporting a head wound that he's apparently leaving exposed to the sandy elements, digs up Tony's old power armor to presumably reassemble for his own and presumably nefarious purposes. Obadiah then sexily plays the piano for Tony, which, paired with the shirtless phone calls, suggests that the man may have some ulterior motives, some posterior motives. You catch my... But
why aren't you wearing those pajamas I got you?
And even if he doesn't, the company board sure does, because they fire Tony in an attempt to inspire this universe's Aaron Sorkin to write a Steve Jobs-style biopic with a acerbic... Damn it. I write big words that I know, but I can't pronounce.
Okay. Acerbic. So you get acerbic. You were right.
With acerbic dialogue.
If a fire causes a stampede to the unmarked exits, it'll have been well worth it for those who survive.
But okay, pretty soon after, Tony finishes his first Iron Man suit. And though he's rich, he's not evidently wealthy enough to have separate garages for weapons of mass destruction and his expensive car. Tony then takes his new toy on a test flight, complete with some more butt-ripping butt rock. The suit has an extremely elaborate heads-up display that occasionally locks onto random Ferris wheels for no reason other than to better sell visual gags. Tony immediately decides to fly as high as he can to manufacture enough tension to technically qualify this as an action scene. Then he flies home and blows up his multi-purpose garage again. Somebody needs to build Tony a carport. Oh, hey, look, it's Stan Lee as Hugh Hefner. So Tony is at a firefighter family benefit, which is a thing, I guess, and Pepper is there looking like a total smoke show in the dress that she essentially embezzled from Tony.
Oh, it was a birthday present from you, actually.
I got great taste.
So he forces her to dance, which is kind of like sexual harassment, given that he's her boss and she doesn't want to dance, but then again, she did steal some of his money, so... it's romantic.
I could fire you if that'd take the edge off.
Later that evening, Stain reveals he's behind getting Tony fired, and that's a bummer, but also what's to stop Tony from starting Tony's weapon emporium on the side? If he's truly the full genius behind the company, just start a new one. He literally just invented some new insane energy source. Use that as your first product. Another product? The Iron Man suit. He's practically already filmed the first commercial. Look, here's Tony looking like a badass, just blowing up glass. Whopper. Not even glass can withstand the iron cannon. Look at him, he's twirling. Ow, firepower, look out, terrorists. Spin move. Whopper. Second commercial, Tony flying to Afghanistan or wherever and just butchering terrorists and being all cool and shit about it. Punching through walls and stuff. Whopper. He is briefly shot out of the air by mankind's most impossibly accurate tank, but then he no-look blows it up, so we're back to being cool and shit. And as he's flying away, he's accosted by some American fighter jets who want to attack, but first need clearance to engage.
Permission granted!
Tony straight gooses one of the fighters on accident. Rhodes pretends to be upset by all this, but he's just thrilled that there's a new shiny weapon in town. Elsewhere, Stain meets with the Ten Rings in person and admits that he organized a hit on Tony, and they're like, well, we would have killed him if we didn't realize how valuable he was, and Stain was like, I was just trying to save some budget on this murdering my boss deal, and they're like, I get it, but you know, not cool, and he's like, no, I get it for you too, and he walks up to their new Iron Man robot, and he fingers it, and then he kills everybody. Later, the worst superhero trope ever happens, and Pepper is like, Tony, stop being a superhero, oh my god, you might die, and Tony's like, nah, this is the coolest shit, and she's like, ah. This happens in Daredevil and Spider-Man every 12 seconds. And it's like, obviously, they're not going to agree with you. If Spider-Man stops Spider-Man-ing, he starts f***ing dancing. And nobody wants that. Just let them fight, damn it. Stop nagging.
I'd love to shoot you sometime.
Pepper then heads to the office and steals some information, and Stain is creepy. Stain realizes what Pepper did later, though, so he goes home and uses a magic knockout device on Tony.
Breathe.
And then rips his magnet heart out of his chest. This is partially because Stain's scientists are unable to replicate Tony's small version arc reactor without access to the real thing. And this despite the scientists starring in A Christmas Story.
Well, I'm sorry.
I do wish we ever got a sense of why Stain is this much of an asshole other than because somebody's gotta. He's murdering his best friend's kid by forced heart attack. Not very nice. He also says,
You really think just because you have an idea, it belongs to you?
Because it's important that we all remember that Ayn Rand was right. And individualist capitalism friggin' rules. BioShock is a video game about why Andrew Ryan and Rapture are ideal. And intellectual property stealing communists like Obadiah Stane are the main evil in this world. And then Obadiah takes that heart to the lab and finds a way to create his own Iron Boy. Tony pulls a Wolf of Wall Street and rolls around a bit until he can insert his backup heart. Then he, Pepper, and Coulson, with his boys, head over to the lab to stop Stain from doing something evil. They open a door and see a sequel hook that never comes to pass because Rhodey gets recast because he wanted more money.
Next time, baby.
Then Iron Stain literally bursts out of the floor and reveals himself to be a real porker, a real thick boy. He and Tony fight for approximately forever. Highlights of their forever fight include throwing cars of civilians at Tony, which again, I guess implies that he's insane, but why? Has he always been this way? Is this suggesting that any of us might throw a minivan if we had the power to do so? They're not wrong. Still weird. Eventually, Tony Chekhov ices Stain, and then he and Pepper hack a big arc reactor to explode and kill Stain, resulting in the MCU's first big blue light beam. Later the next day, Coulson carefully crafts a cover story for Tony that Tony immediately blows up by admitting,
I am
John Cena! In the end credits, we see a one-eyed Shaft-looking dude named Nick Fury who asks Tony if he thinks Tony is the only superhero, which... Is he a superhero, though? Tony's just a dude with a suit. Feels a little early in the game to call him a superhero. Fury also mentions an Avengers initiative, but fails to mention what exactly needs avenging. Feels like it's more of a preemptive security initiative. If you're avenging something, the bad shit already happened, right? Right. I'm a genius. Somebody give me a suit. We can CG the muscles on, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Rah! Rah!
Wait. We can't do this. It's okay, I want to. No.
So now we've got the Incredible Hulk. I'll be the judge of how incredible this guy is, and his incredible movie, though, starts off pretty strong with some rad science shit. I mean, look at that stuff go. Wowzers. Actually, it sort of looks like they're pulling a Mission Impossible here and previewing the entire movie before the movie starts, or wait, no, it's the actual intro. We're ripping through Hulk's entire origin story and little blips and winks and him beating the shit out of both elf and mortal man. It's like if Batman's parents got gunned down in the street during an opening credits montage, as opposed to a single slow motion pearls falling sequence that lasts longer than the entirety of content ever uploaded to TikTok. As far as I can tell, this dude injected himself with an experimental drug that made him huge and green and mean. Ah! We also see some Stark Industries tech, and also a little note from Nick Fury. It's like it's all tied together, man. Anyway, the film begins in earnest with a surprisingly shredded Edward Norton as Bruce Banner. He's hanging out in Brazil, and of course, they show us a favela, because as far as Hollywood knows, that's the only living situation that exists in Brazil. Let's throw it to my Brazilian brother-in-law and see what he thinks about this depiction.
Yeah, tudo mentira.
There's always room for family.
Oh, and maybe this is a stealth Ratatouille sequel because Bruce asks his dog for cooking advice.
Is it ready?
You know how to fix it. This is your chance.
But the dog's palate is apparently completely unrefined because he offers no coherent recipe tweaks.
What are you blathering about?
Then Bruce watches Sesame Street in Portuguese to presumably learn the language and then receives training to learn how to make his stomach do the absolute weirdest possible And finally, Bruce gets slapped so he can show off his Fight Club face. Banner works at a factory that creates Pingo Doce, an unholy green drink that is both not real and translates to sweet drop. Unfortunately, Bruce gets bullied while there, because as everybody knows, factories are the high schools of Brazil. Thankfully, that makes it sound like they don't go to f***ing school in Brazil, and they just go to the factories. I'm sorry, Guy. I don't know. That's not the intention of the joke.
Yep, it's all bullshit.
You don't turn your back on family.
Thankfully, just like high schoolers, one of Bruce's coworkers is absurdly attractive. Uh-oh. Looks like I'm hulking out again. Also, it turns out Bruce the scientist is pretty good at fixing machine but not so good as to not slice his finger open and let sweet drops of his fully radioactive blood plop into open bottles of the fake drink. Then, sexy coworker gets accosted, then Bruce threatens the accoster by telling him he wouldn't like Bruce when Bruce is hungry, because translation issues, and also Snickers commercials.
You get a little angry when you're hungry?
Back at home, Bruce gets a flower in the mail and does some computer and turns the flower into a drug because a dude on the internet told him to. Bruce is gonna get catfished so hard someday.
When can we finally meet?
Also, side note, I just realized my whole body has been tense the entire time I've been watching because the music has not let up on being full-on dramatic during every single random scene. Freaking calm down, Craig. Anyway, this might surprise you, but the drug suggested by a strange man on the internet doesn't work. And so the internet man, who goes by Mr. Blue, suggests he and Bruce should meet in America. And oh, if you want Bruce, maybe you could mail your buddy Mr. Blue a little blood? Bruce, it looks like you found a grade A pervert, a 4chan king, a truth social admin. But Bruce doesn't know about internet safety, so he mails off some blood that'll definitely be mixed into Mr. Blue's semen.
Here we go.
Here it is! So he mails off some of his blood that'll definitely be mixed into Mr. Blue's semen and chugged like a milkshake. Too gross? No, that's life. Those are facts. Welcome to the internet. It's scary here. You need to learn how to cope.
Laugh out loud.
Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, the mortal man who Bruce smacked in the intro, General Thaddeus Ross, rest in peace, also hello Harrison Ford, finds out that somebody in Milwaukee somehow contracted some gamma radiation sickness similar to what Bruce is dealing with. As it turns out, Stan Lee had drunk a Bruce blood-infected Pingo Doce, just like Mr. Blue is gonna do here in about 5 minutes. They trace the drink back to Brazil and head down there to look for
a white man at that bottling plant.
The Hulk is green. Good luck. They bring along the sexiest, strongest soldier they can find. Tim Roth. 47-year-old Tim Roth. What? The cinematographer does the best he can to make Tim look like a sex pot beefcake, but it's Tim Roth, guys.
No, cause I was...
But we at least know him and his team are evil because they do the literal exact opposite of saving the cat and kill the dog. In the movie business, this is known as pulling a Kevin Spacey.
Kill them with kindness.
They breach the door to Bruce's abode and tranquilize the out of a Ferris Bueller contraption. Bruce, meanwhile, performs the single sexiest rappel of all time because his sexy coworker was apparently bathing right underneath him. He's lived above her this whole time? No wonder he's been mailing blood to perverts on the internet. Anything to distract himself. My secret is I'm always horny. As you'd expect, we then transition to the classic favela chase scene we've seen in 10,000 movies, including running through open-air laundry to death. Eventually, Bruce is accosted himself by the aforementioned accoster, and now Bruce is being chased by both spec ops and a handful of ugly-ass Brazilians. They eventually corner him in a warehouse, but nobody bothered to explain to the spec ops dudes that this guy becomes an invincible killing machine when angered. And well, he becomes an invincible killing machine.
This is the one thing we didn't want to happen.
After Hulk throws a forklift at Tim Roth, Roth exclaims that Hulk is the most powerful thing he's ever seen. Thaddeus sort of brushes it aside and says Tim did a good job, even though he quite literally did not. He failed to apprehend Banner, got half his men killed, and flirted with sparking an international incident by blowing up a Pingo Doce factory on foreign soil. But yeah, in the army, it's the effort that matters. Roth, though, will not be deterred, and he's like, yo, let me have another crack at him, man. I just love fighting. Ross is like, well, you're what, 45? And Roth goes, no, I'm 39. And Ross is like, yeah, this job ages you, so that's probably why you look old. And surely there are other actors in the world that could have played this role, right?
And his name is John C.
I get that he should be relatively unassuming so that when he inevitably takes the drug himself at some point, the contrast will be greater, but I don't know, man. I'm not buying this Tim as a spec ops master soldier. It's my job. Bruce, for his part, wakes up next to some gorgeous waterfall looking like Adam and Eden, if Adam was naked except for some ripped pants. He somehow gets from Brazil to Culver University in Virginia because the damn liberals won't finish Trump's big beautiful border wall. And apparently Virginia in 2008 was disgusting. Why is there so much floating in the air? It looks like somebody strangled a Great Pyrenees. Anyway, he sees Arwen, and I can practically hear her dad screaming in the background because though Bruce lusts for her greatly, she's apparently dating Phil Dunphy. And you are not gonna beat that dude in a dick measuring contest. Believe me.
That's my thing.
So a dejected Bruce heads to Stanley's bar. Get it? Stan Lee? Like the guy from Holes? Yell Nats?
There ain't gonna be no Yell Nats Sofia!
Apparently he knows the owner, who is not, in fact, a Stan Lee cameo, even though that'd make perfect sense. The owner lets Bruce crash there and also steal some free pizza, which he uses to trick TV's Hulk, Lou Ferrigno, into letting him into one of the school buildings. The scene is meant to be funny, but this is like a year after the Virginia Tech shooting. People sneaking through security onto Virginia college campuses isn't that funny anymore.
God bless you, brother.
Bruce uses an additional pizza to bribe some geek because presumably in the MCU, you could breach Fort Knox as long as you had enough stuffed crust. And Bruce uses EncryptNet or whatever to learn, somebody has already wiped the data that he needs to help Mr. Bruce make him a cure. Damn it, all that pizza was for nothing. So many wasted calories.
P-I-Z-Z-A.
Did I say Mr. Bruce again?
Mr. Bruce?
God damn. Bruce goes back to Mr. Yelnat's bar, and what do you know? Arwen and Phil Dunphy are there, forcing the extremely old man to make them a special late-night meal.
Well, closed here, folks. I'm sorry.
Oh, come on, Stan. It's Friday night.
Oh.
Even though he's trying to close up and go to bed before he has a stroke or whatever, because he's probably 1,000 years old.
Welcome to Rivendell.
Arwen thinks she sees Bruce, so she chases after him on foot and then in a car, and then they hug in the rain because each the Notebook. This is a real love triangle.
We're back to that.
Also, the reunion immediately ends Arwen and Phil's relationship, presumably.
That's horrible.
They go back to Arwen's place and she reveals that she did keep a copy of Bruce's data on a thumb drive, and also reveals that even though at the time Bruce thought he was making a cure for something, the general was secretly making it into a weapon. Now, I'm no Neil deGrasse Tyson, but how of a scientist do you have to be to not realize the serum you're working on is intended to be weaponized? And why would you inject yourself with it without really knowing what the hell it is or does? That's just bad science, bro.
I have no choice.
Whatever. Bruce sleeps on the couch and Arwen touches herself. Speaking of touching ourselves, here's that shirtless Tim Roth scene we've all been begging for. Ooh, and even more touchy-touchy. Look at this little hat Bruce is wearing before he gets undressed by Arwen in public. God! This movie's hot. But then, they're attacked by evidently the entire US military with tanks and everything. So we now know that tanks are largely useless at counterinsurgency because for every bad guy you blow up with a tank in a city, you create 10 more insurgents who are pissed about their city getting tanked. But I don't think that means we shouldn't bring tanks onto college campuses and just, see what happens. It's those kids' fault for thinking they could get an education away from potential tank battles. I really want to elaborate on how counterinsurgency should work.
This is really turning into like a speech on geopolitics.
Yeah, welcome to my TED Talk on counterinsurgency. Terrorists win. So whatever, there's a bunch of stuff going on, and Tim Roth runs really fast because he's gotten a drug injection like I thought he would. And Arwen runs very slowly after an APC for some reason, and Bruce decides to eat a SanDisk thumb drive, sponsored by SanDisk. SanDisk goes down so smooth and comes out even smoother. Get yourself a SanDisk treat thumb drive today.
Flames real tasty.
Then Arwen goes full Tiananmen and stands in front of the tanks. She also calls Ross General, but apparently that's her dad, so shouldn't she call him General Daddy or Daddy General? I don't know the official military jargon, but it doesn't really work either way, so they gas Banner, which predictably causes him to Hulk out. The CG here is not great, especially considering they spent $150,000,2008 on this. Ross is like, well, at least now Arwen will see what happens when Bruce hulks out and why he's dangerous, but Bruce already beat the shit out of her once. She's very aware of what happens when he hulks out. Whatever, they send in the troops, including this Humvee that gets literally airborne because I guess they were just rushing late from an Arby's run. Or maybe this is just the return of the Fun V from Iron Man. Everything's connected.
I'm sorry, this is the Fun V.
Tim also gets in the action and fights Hulk one-on-one with some cool flips and shit, but ultimately just shoots Hulk with a damn pistol with one clip. What's the plan here? Hulk with your amaze Hulk with your acrobatic abilities and hope he gets dizzy and passes out? Or maybe it's to distract from these weird noise cannons? I don't know, but Hulk defeats them with makeshift armor shield things, and the army's gunship takes forever to arrive because presumably it's flying in from Brazilian Arby's. I write these things late at night. I don't know what's in there. So to buy even more time, Tim walks up to the Hulk and insults him, and then he gets fucking obliterated. Again, what's the plan, amazing fighter Tim? What did you think was going to happen? The gunship does finally arrive, but oh no, there it goes. Hulk protects Arwen in the resultant explosion and runs away with her to a secret cave. It's raining pretty hard, and Hulk throws a rock at the lightning, Or maybe God. And Arwen is like, dude, chill out, it's just rain. Then they go to sleep, which causes Bruce to turn back into his nearly nude, nearly normal self. Arwen takes Bruce to a hotel and lets him shower and have, a little bit of PTSD. When he gets out, he seems surprised to see her for some reason. And then he pukes up the sand disc so smooth. Arwen has bought him some clothes, including stretchy purple pants because comments. Then Arwen gets wet somehow and gives Bruce a haircut. They try and bang, but Bruce knows if he gets any hard, he'll get really hard, and they can't risk a Horty Hulk incident.
That's my secret.
Speaking of, is there a worse fate than not sleeping with Liv Tyler? I live that existence every day, and I'll tell you what, I do not recommend it. Elsewhere, a random college kid on the news calls the monster Hulk, because yeah, that's definitely the first word I'd think of. Ross talks to Phil, who is mean to him, and Ross is like, where does she meet these guys? And it's like, work, dude. Both of Arwen's boyfriends are from work. You're a terrible dad. Oh, and apparently Hulk didn't fully kill Tim, but man, it's close. Oh wait, no, he's fine actually. In fact, the random male nurse standing off to the side somehow looks way worse than Tim, if you can even believe that's possible. Arwen and Bruce find their way to New York City and meet up with Mr. Blue, who turns out to be Tim Blake Nelson doing just an America standard accent instead of his typical deep southern drawl, which is incredibly racist towards my people and my heritage.
Dr. Ross.
We didn't crawl out of the West Virginia mountains to settle in Johnson City, Tennessee just for you to pretend we don't exist. We could be scientists. We're not. We're all idiots descended from coal miners, but that doesn't mean we couldn't be. Where's our on-screen smart people representation, huh?
Well, it's funny you should ask.
Damn it. Whatever. Blue ties Bruce down in case there's a problem, or possibly to allow Arwen to finally ride him safely, or oh no, it's to induce him to rage so they can give him some sort of antidote. Makes sense. Bruce starts transforming and oh look, Arwen had the same idea as me and she hops right onto that big green thing. We get a gratuitous Gamma Boy foot shot and Blue deflates Bruce with a syringe. Then Blue gives a little tour and shows Bruce that he's actually been replicating all the blood that Bruce keeps sending in the mail in the hopes of using it for nebulous big S science application. And Bruce is like, that is not why I sent you my blood. It was for blood cum milkshakes, you sicko. This could destroy humanity. But before he can do anything about it, Bruce is darted through the window and knocked out, and Tim comes in and punches the out of the general's daughter. Bitch slap! Tim then convinces Blue to give him extra drug, and Blue is like, sure, I'd be happy to, while the now captured Arwen and Bruce play footsie on a helicopter. Tim transforms into a Hulk knockoff and throws Blue onto the ground, but a little serum gets into Blue's head, and it gets all swollen like a Dave at a Hooters. Talking about Dave's dick, it's a new era! Then Tim runs outside and starts smashing everything. There doesn't appear to be a reason for his rampage other than that it looks cool in a 2008 CG way. So Bruce jumps out of the helicopter to help stop him, even though Bruce doesn't actually know if he can transform back into the Hulk, given that Blue literally just cured him, technically, but of course he can't transform, so whatever. So then the Hulk Sled-Do fights, and at some point it seems like Tim will win, but then Hulk will like use a cop car as boxing gloves, so it's very back and forth as you might expect for the final fight. The helicopter tries to help by chain gunning Tim, but it flies too close and crashes. Oh look, Hulk sweat. Good to see that he's getting in a good workout. Then Hulk claps out of fire, and then Hulk smash, and then Hulk choke, and then this little fight scene is actually kind of violent in a really surprising way. I guess they can get away with it because neither combatant is fully human, but it's kind of dark. Also, Arwen yells at Hulk to not actually murder Tim at the last moment so that he maintains his purity. I mean, other than the 50 soldiers that he presumably killed at Culver University earlier, but at least we still got Tim. Hulk then wipes away a single Arwen tear and runs away like a little bitch to Canada to presumably meditate and other hippie shit. In a post-credit scene, Tony Stark shows up to a bar to tell Ross that, yeah, he's putting together a team, bro. Where that big green boy at? And that's interesting, but again, what do they think they're building this team for? Other than that it would be cool to have a team? And also, why would Ross tell him where the Hulk is? If he knew where the Hulk is, Ross would go kill Hulk, not add him to a fun team. Whatever.
Oh, by the way, you have to watch all the short films too.
What? Why?
Because they exist solely to paper over plot holes and shit. And that's important to me, and it should be important to you.
You're right. It totally is.
It didn't go well, did it?
No, I did not.
So apparently Marvel heard what I was saying, so they made a short film to fix that little plot hole. See, after the events of Hulk, Coulson tells a guy named Jasper Sitwell, drinking from a Dr. Pepper mug, that higher-up authorities think Bruce Banner sucks. And instead of adding him to a super team, they actually want Sitwell to send somebody to ask General Ross if he'll let Abomination be a part of the Avengers initiative.
The Abomination. They really don't like when you call him that.
But neither Coulson nor Sitwell want Abomination to be a part of the team because, well, just look at the dude's name.
Blonsky.
But they can't refuse a direct order, so they send in Tony Stark to ask because they know he's so annoying, Ross will refuse. And so they do, and he is, and he does.
You always wear such nice suits.
Glad we got that out of the way. So I guess he wasn't talking about Hulk in the post-credits scene earlier, but Abomination, and he just wasn't specific enough, so it still counts. That's stupid.
Touche.
Bah, bah, bah. Right? Right?
I'm a little confused about how to make this part awesome.
Once we get the CG in here, this is gonna look tight. Ah!
What are we supposed to CG in here anyway?
Whips are awesome.
No, they aren't.
I need you to wear a surgical mask until you're feeling better. Is that okay?
That's rude.
Iron Man 2 opens with a nice recreation of what I imagine watching the first Iron Man must have felt like if I was a poor Russian. If I'm remembering my history correctly, a lack of high-definition Marvel movies is what led to Putin's rise. Anyway, the viewer we center on is a poor Russian man clearly dying of vodka poisoning or something, and his poor Russian son who's there kind of just consoling him as he dies. The dad says the son should have been the Iron Man and then dies, while the son just pets his face. Vodka swig. Scream. What a gentleman in Moscow.
Thank you.
The man, named Ivan, immediately gets to work welding and hammering and eating sad Russian sandwiches and manages to apparently build his own version of Tony's arc reactor because he somehow has access to blueprints that suggest the thing was co-created by Ivan's daddy. He also has a bird and a ton of magazine covers. Due to subscribe to everything. Good for him. Sign up for my Patreon, Ivan. Or at least my YouTube channel. Whatever. Enough of that. Now we're 6 months later and Iron Man is dropped at some sort of trade show thing via cargo plane. Now, I don't know if they know this, but Iron Man can already fly. Like, from California to Afghanistan. So I'm not sure how much fuel they're saving by dropping him off in a freaking cargo plane.
I said hop in.
But as he falls, he gets hit by a firework, suggesting that everything about this stunt was poorly planned. He lands at what's called the Stark Expo, where he's stripped by a robot in front of a bunch of sexy dancing ladies and an American flag. Extremely Washington Redskins vibes here. Tony informs the crowd they're currently living through one of the longest periods of peace in modern history, and this expo is a chance for scientists all over the world to pool resources for a year and then build cool crap. Then there's a video by Daddy Stark explaining that this expo is actually a full-on pop-up Epcot future city.
The sketches and plans you will see today are simply a starting point.
Why is it that? I don't know. Tony stumbles off stage and we learn that his blood is mad toxic.
That's not toxic masculinity.
Then Olivia Munn makes a cameo appearance solely for sweaty nerds like me, and then Tony does a weird first-person stumble through a crowd that includes Stan Lee cosplaying as Larry King, which is quite the boner deflator after that Munn appearance, but then the boners are pumped right back up with a Kate Mara appearance, but then again we're deflated when we realize that she's serving a Senate subpoena. My crotch is flying around like one of those inflatable balloon dudes at a used car place. Thanks, Kevin Feige.
It's all Ryan Coogler.
Whilst in court, Tony is a bit of a dick and makes a lot of sex worker jokes while mugging for the crowd.
To turn over the Iron Man suit would be to turn over myself, which is tantamount to indentured servitude or prostitution, depending on what state you're in.
The Senate, probably rightly, thinks it's a bad idea for a private citizen to personally own the world's most powerful weapon, but counterpoint, Tony says,
Can't have it.
The Senate brings out a low-grade Elon Musk type, played by Sam Rockwell, to show how other countries are developing their own government-funded Iron People. But Tony somehow hacks the screen and shows that actually these pseudo-Iron Men suck. They also bring in a recast Rhodey to read a single, out-of-context paragraph from his report on Iron Man that makes him seem anti-Tony when the reality is a lot more nuanced. How positively American, evangelical, conservative Christian of them.
How many AR-15s do you think Jesus would have had? Well, he didn't have enough to keep his government from killing him.
None of it sways Tony, who happily announces that he has privatized world peace, causing a senator to say, "F you, Mr. Stark," which is fair. Why are people so excited that world peace rests entirely in the gloved hands of one alcoholic Lothario? Especially considering, back in Russia, the anti-Iron Man has made whips. He channeled the power of the arc reactor into whips. Iron Man can fly, my dude, and shoot lasers, and you made whips. Good luck! Now, Tony is back in his lab, and his robot knocks over a blender, but like, shouldn't his robot be amazing? Or does Tony literally keep it around solely for comedic relief? Does he know he's being watched by millions of moviegoers worldwide? I don't know, but he does seem to know that he's dying because he's chugging daily 80-ounce green smoothies that counteract the palladium poisoning coming from his heart reactor.
That appalling phrase.
His powers are killing him and he's becoming weaker, and ain't that always the plot of the second movie in a superhero series? Oh no, my power, I'm so frail. Mary Jane, marry me.
Punch me, I bleed.
Anyway, Pepper comes down and is a little sniffly, so Tony asks her to wear a mask, given that he's a bit immunocompromised at the moment, and she says that's rude because apparently she is anti-vax. But that doesn't matter to Tony because
I don't care about the liberal agenda anymore.
It's what keeps the world going round.
And he makes Potts CEO. Goop about to get into weapons manufacturing. Look out, terrorists! If you smell a pussy, a missile ain't far behind. Trademark. Tony also says,
don't think, drink.
Which is almost certainly not the first time he said that to a woman. Then Tony boxes with Jon Favreau's character, who's named Happy, and a sexy notary from legal shows up needing him to sign the official CEO paperwork, and Tony finds sexy photos of her on the internet, and then she beats the shit out of Happy.
Oh my!
That's the scene. I explained it. I'm good at this. Now, Tony is at the Grand Prix and talks to a real-world supervillain. He also runs into the fake supervillain that Sam Rockwell is playing, as well as the girl who writes for Variety that he had sex with in the last movie. Pepper slut-shames her again because, man, these movies are sure pre-widespread Me Too.
She did quite a spread on Tony last year.
This movie really feels like a Ocean's movie imitation. Like a bunch of snarky hot people talking over each other. Oh, lay there. But without quality writing or much actual charisma.
Gorgeous is tough.
Can I ask you, is this...
But anyway, all the mumbling and misogyny gets Tony excited enough to just enter the Prix in the car he owns for no reason. Of course, Ivan is there looking real lumpy because he somehow smuggled his cats of nine tails through security. He walks onto the track and, well, he starts whipping shit with his whips, starting with his own clothing. Then Tony's car. And Happy sees what's happening and also joins the race. All the other drivers crash even without getting whipped, and apparently nobody is thinking to shoot the whip boy, so he and Tony fight a bit until Happy hits him with the car. And then again, and again, and again. Look, I've seen signs.
It's okay to be silly.
He should be dead now. Swing away, Ivan. Swing away. Finally, Tony dons his suitcase suit and they fight some more, but Tony's still having issues because he refuses to actually fly out of range of the whips. Whatever. He wins, and the cops drag Ivan away and apparently strip him down to his undies. Tony goes in to talk to him, and Ivan says a bunch of vague villain shit. And Tony offers a quick prison rape joke. Because of course he does.
I'll send you a bar soap.
Tony leaves to make a omelet, and somebody organizes Ivan's dramatic escape that relies heavily on explosive mashed potatoes. It is, of course, Sam Rockwell, who, I'm just gonna say, freaking sucks in this movie. I love Sam Rockwell in almost everything. Man, he sucks in this movie.
He's a human being.
Doesn't help that he's spray tan and apparently playing to the effeminate villain stereotype. Great. Then Sam Rockwell shows Ivan his current attempt at iron creations, but they suck as hard as Sam Rockwell in this movie, which is to say considerably.
I got a sweet tooth. Apparently you do too for Tony Stark.
And he wants Ivan to make them better. As you can imagine, this relationship gets more and more tense over the course of the movie because Ivan turns the Sam suits into drones. And he also kills all of Sam Rockwell's men. Meanwhile, Tony learns of the Whip Boy's dad's past. Apparently, he was one of those money-grubbing weapons developers, unlike the completely pure of heart weapons developer, Tony Stark. Stony Tark. Apparently he was one of those money-grubbing weapons developers, unlike the completely pure of heart weapons developer Howard Stark. So that's why he got sent to the gulags. Tony himself, meanwhile, is looking rough. Well, at least his nipples look decent. Speaking of, ScarJo, the notary turned assistant, reappears to come on to him real strong. She tells Tony that if she was gonna die, she'd do whatever she wanted with whoever. Tony takes this to mean get drunk, DJ a party, and piss himself. There are a lot of watermelons at this party. Rhodes shows up in one of Tony's alternate suits to try and force him to chill out by threatening to kill him. Shockingly, that works exactly as well as it always does. And Tony gets the other DJ to throw on a fat beat to beat his friend's fat ass. And what is that fat beat? Another one bites the dust, but remixed to be shit.
I told you to shut it down.
They blow up the house some, and then Rhodes flies away to give the suit to the US military because they've realized that somebody else is extremely close to replicating Tony's iron tech, and they can't wait for Tony to hand it over peacefully. Man, are they pumped to get that suit? The music is patriotic as hell. They are so excited to kill so many people for America. Sam Rockwell even shows up to add a bunch of extra guns to it in a weird gun fetishy presentation that goes forever. Rhodes orders all of it because that dude just loves weapons and America. The next day, hungover Tony grabs a donut with Nick Fury and twist! ScarJo's leather-clad ass also shows up and reveals that her name is Natasha and she's been working undercover with S.H.I.E.L.D. They promise they can heal Tony of his heart disease, or at least they can help Tony heal himself by having Coulson give him an old box of his dad's old shit.
You didn't do anything.
Didn't I?
Nick tells Tony that his dad super loved him, even though he apparently literally never told him that. Coulson is there to make sure that Tony figures something out in the box of shit and threatens to tase Tony if he tries to leave. Tony finds some old footage of his dad in the box and watches for a bit, and even though his dad is a dick to little Tony,
Put it back where you got it from.
he also says Tony is super smart and should be able to discover a new element or whatever. And that is supposed to be some big reveal about how much his dad loves him. He treated Tony like shit, but because he thought Tony would be useful someday to science, that counts as love? Powerful. But his dad is right, and Tony eventually realizes the map of Stark Epcot is actually laid out like a molecule. So he goes and grabs a big model version for Pepper's office, even though Coulson made such a big deal about subduing Tony if he ever left the premises. Tony also gives Pepper strawberries, even though she's allergic. But at least the Hispanic man he bought them from kindly says, oh look, they got Bill O'Reilly over here playing an ass. Totally going against type.
That doesn't interest me one bit.
Back at home, Tony smashes up his garage, creating a machine that'll let him synthesize this new impossible element, even though I feel like that would take forever. But whatever. He and Coulson do some laser science shit and also inexplicably use a proto-Captain America shield as a wedge. It works, and they create a new element or whatever. Tony pops the new thing into his chest and says what I always say after a good blowy.
It tastes like coconut.
So you're giving a blow?
That's the twist. But okay, so Sam Rockwell is now presenting at the Stark Expo, and how up is the Marvel Cinematic Universe that weapons designers are treated like A-list celebrities? Why is everybody so damn excited for him to unveil new instruments of death, like he's about to show actual gameplay footage of BioShock 4? And look, there's some drones and also Iron Fat Bastard.
Oh, it smells like carrots and throw up.
The bloodthirsty fun is spoiled when Iron Man flies up and is like, bro, I think Ivan hacked those drones. He was gonna shoot everybody. And Sam Rockwell is complicit since he freed Ivan in the first place, and Rhodey is like, what? That sucks. Also, oh shit, I can't move.
Demons making my nuts rub together.
Oops, I'm chain gunning into the crowd while the drones start flying around. You know, American cop shit. Then Natasha and Pepper show up and beat up Sam Rockwell a bit, and they claim they're calling the NYPD. The NYPD? I know their $5 billion plus budget could fund these videos for 1,000 years, but shouldn't we call them the actual military? You know, the guys who presumably retrofitted and approved these machines for military use? You wouldn't call in a detective to tussle with a rogue tank, right?
Bake them away, toys.
Also, side note, what is Ivan's plan? He mentions wanting to destroy the Stark legacy and get revenge for his dad or something, but what does blowing up a bunch of random shit do other than confirm, yeah, maybe these Russian guys are nuts and shouldn't have access to American technology? Is he hoping Tony will feel bad for not turning his tech over to the military? The military whose tech is actively running rampant because they can't control it? Doesn't make sense, Ivan. Anyway, the rampaging drones try and kill a little iron boy, but fail, just like Happy fails to not watch Natasha changing in the backseat of his car as they go to Ivan's last known position. But to be fair, once they're fully clothed, they fight through a building, and Natasha's fight choreography is cooler than 90% of the other MCU fights. I sort of get why they get away from this ground level, gritty hand-to-hand fighting stuff, but man, it is so refreshing to not just watch a bunch of pixels smoosh together over and over forever and ever. Also, why doesn't anybody fight dirty like Happy anymore? We need more honorless pieces of shit in the Avengers.
Another!
Eventually, they get to the computer and give Rhodes control of his armor back, even though Ivan himself is long gone. Elsewhere, Tony and Rhodey fly around, and this line sucks, especially in this context.
Drop your socks and grab your Crocs. We're about to get wet on this ride.
The limits of having to be clever all the time, I guess. The two fall into some random magical geisha garden dome, and they go back to back like the classic video game Army of Two, the 40th day, and they shoot a bunch of drones. They could continue to fly around, but that's lame, and they're bulletproof. Anyway, Ivan shows up in a power suit he built, but like, he still just has freaking whips. And they still don't fly away, but they also don't seem too worried about it. Even when Ivan cuts Rhodey's gun in half, this is all the facial expression he can muster. And he's Academy Award nominated Don Cheadle. Oh, lay out. Ivan whips them both and holds them in place, and instead of shooting Ivan in his exposed face, they decide to cross streams.
We'll cross the streams.
And that blows him up. And even though Ivan is now a crumpled heap, he claims "You lose" and initiates a beeping countdown that suggests he and all the drones are ready to explode. I mean, it's pretty thoughtful of Ivan to give Tony a warning and sort of a head start so he can save Pepper and basically ensure there is no lasting damage. Thanks, Ivan. Then Tony and Pepper make out weird on a roof and she quits her job. And even better, Rhodes is there watching.
I heard the whole thing.
Do iron suits self-clean jizz? Only Don Cheadle knows for sure. Oh, later, Tony watches some footage of the Hulk happenings, which I guess were happening almost simultaneously with this movie. And then Nick shows up and is like, we actually don't really want you in the Avengers yet because you're crazy, but you can consult. And Tony says, fine, but only if the mean senator who swore at me gives me a medal. The inevitable post-credit scene shows Coulson driving into a desert with New Mexico license plates to observe a crater made by, apparently, Mjolnir, which any nerd could tell you is Thor's hammer.
Tell that to the Covenant.
Wow, it has been a crazy week for these guys.
Tell them those Tybo tapes really paid off.
So apparently 12 hours or so before the Iron Man 2 post-credit scene, Coulson is driving the Thor's hammer through the desert. But on the way, he stops for gas and donuts. Unfortunately, before he can decide what chalky goodness to put in his holes, the store is robbed.
Hands up, don't move!
The robbers turn around like full back to Coulson, but he calls their attention back to him to let them know that he has a gun.
I also have this gun.
He could have just shot them, but he doesn't because that's not cool or honorable, I guess. And instead, he slides his gun towards them and then uses the distraction to beat the shit out of them with flour and with weird speed ramp fight moves amplified with off-putting CG and very out-of-sync grunts and screams. Then he buys 2 things of donuts, tells the woman at the register to keep the change, and tells her to say that she beat up the thieves, even though surely there's a security camera in there somewhere. Then he gets back in the car, and you know, the gas is actually pretty expensive. $3.80 is plenty high, even pre-Ukraine invasion, though it is supreme. But still, seems like gas prices fluctuate a lot, huh? Glad we all got to share in this moment together. Ah!
Looks like doing it without my budget is going great.
Alright, so Thor the movie opens in New Mexico with a bunch of weirdos driving a truck full of science equipment around in the desert in the middle of the night in what I can only assume is a convoluted Breaking Bad homage. An old man with an accent tells an attractive lady with the name Jane that
You can't keep doing this.
and she says something atmospheric disturbances.
I'm telling you, there's a connection between these atmospheric disturbances and my
Wet ass P-word.
After a moment of tense silence, a freaky aura borealis looking lights and shit appear in the sky, presumably proving Jane correct. But hold on, her brain isn't fully working because she literally drives right into a crazy tornado storm thing to film it with a little handheld camera. Still unclear what this will prove, but good on her for being crazy for science. Hopefully some 9-year-old girl watches this and decides to pursue a career in STEM and drive herself into a tornado for a glorious science death.
What are you doing? I am dying of first 6 college credits!
And if Jane's not convincing enough, the fact that a sexy man came down to the tornado should do the trick.
Make that pullout game weak.
But we'll get back to that because now we are in 1965's Norway. The voice of Hannibal Lecter explains that humans used to believe in gods, but those gods were actually a bunch of weird aliens that would beam down and fight massive wars. Aliens called things like frost giants and Asgardians. Looks pretty insanely dramatic, but apparently was only noticed by a handful of dumbass Vikings, and so this incredible historic event got downgraded to fable, even though it feels like there'd be plenty of conclusive evidence of a massive war between a bunch of literal alien gods.
It's false. No way. Not this time.
No? Okay.
It's a made-up tale.
Anyway, frost giants are being bad for no clear reason, but then Hannibal Lecter shows up and kicks their ass, despite the Frosties being armed with very vicious ice balls. Okay, love is dead. You think I'm kidding? But somewhere along the way, Hannibal lost one of his eyeballs. Somebody poked that shit right out with a well-placed ice ball. As punishment, Hannibal steals a blue glowing thing of power called the Casket of Ancient Winters to put in his museum back on Asgard. How very British. And then, oh look, turns out the narration was actually a monologue being delivered to Hannibal's bored-ass sons, only one of whom will be allowed to be king once Hannibal, who they claim is actually named Odin, dies or retires or whatever Asgardians do.
That is incidental.
Not entirely sure how their monarchical system works. Do they have a prime minister on Asgard? What's Liz Truss doing these days?
Just gonna come out.
Doesn't matter. She will still have been a failed prime minister, presumably in a month. Fast forward 20 years or so, and Thor is now older, hotter, and windmilling his piece around for the enjoyment of many. We also get a few epic shots of Asgard, which appears to be the bastard child of Coruscant and Rivendell. Thor approaches Odin's throne and smiles at what appears to be his personal boy harem, which consists of the fourth and gayest musketeer, an overgrown hobbit man, a Japanese guy who just so happens to be literally the only person in Asgard without a British accent.
They were traitors in the House of Odin.
Like, does Asgard accept Japanese immigrants? How do they get there? And also, there's a pretty lady, just so that we know Thor doesn't only have boyfriends.
Thor would do the same for us.
It's made clear that Thor's the official heir to the throne, but before he can be literally crowned king, a bunch of Frosties break into the Colonial Museum. It's all good though, because they get absolutely massacred by the Iron Giant.
Your fantasy app is blowing up.
That's good. That means I'm scoring touchdowns and shit. Let's go! Thor believes this means they should attack the Frosties in retribution, but Odin says, no, you're a damned idiot. Thank God I didn't finish saying you were the new king like 11 seconds ago.
But you're not king!
Naturally, this pisses Thor off, and he flips a table, and god damn, there are a lot of canted angles in this movie. Is director Kenneth Branagh Dutch? I'd say 40% of this movie is angle. Angry Thor convinces his friends to attack the Frosty homeworld all by themselves, I guess. Not sure what that would achieve exactly, but whatever, they ride across a rainbow bridge to an orbital cannon-looking thing called the Bifrost, guarded by Idris Elba in a goofy helmet. He says he shouldn't let them pass, but he can't believe Frosties were able to sneak by him, and he's curious what happened, so he uses the cannon to shoot them all the way to Jotunheim, which is, I guess, the Hoth of this universe. The planet, much like my heart, is cold and empty until, unlike my heart, a big-ass Snow King appears and claims, hey, we were able to sneak into your museum because you guys have a traitor in your midst. Thor and company are like, you're lying, and then they turn to leave rather than unilaterally instigate a war, but then the chilly bully calls Thor a
princess.
Dad.
So Thor murders everybody with his hammer that's also a boomerang. Next. Loki, the dark-haired sad brother, the dark-haired JT Sad Brother, who came along on this unchaperoned ski trip, shows off his holograph creation skills like Mirage and Apex Legends.
I gotta admit, I may have tricked you.
Things take a turn for the gay when the gay musketeer gets stabbed. I didn't see him kissing any girls.
Could be a Prussian.
Some gay musketeers like, what? What the hell?
What?
And they awaken some sort of evil ice frog buffalo. Loki is also revealed to be secretly a little blue and impervious to ice,
never bothered me,
which implies bad things.
I'm afraid I just blew myself.
Thor manages to summon some sort of lightning nuke to buy them some time while they wait for the Bifrost to suck them back to Asgard. But unfortunately, it works on Halo rules and won't work while enemies are nearby.
Wake me.
So not until Thor smashes the frog's brain out of its buffalo head, which he does. Then Daddy shows up and tries to broker a peace, but the Frost King is like, nah, dog, I'm mad now.
let it go.
So Odin leaves with Thor and his harem.
A reading rainbow.
Back home, there is much yelling, including Odin calling Thor a
greedy, cruel boy,
and then just sort of hey! Odin confiscates Thor's hammer and his power and exiles him.
I can go anywhere.
He also whispers some little curse on the hammer that makes it so nobody will be able to wield the thing or have the power of Thor unless they're worthy of doing so. It's a bit weird to leave it open to anybody being able to get a hold of that power. I mean, Odin just nukes Thor and the hammer to Earth for anybody to find. So what are these qualifications such that some random dude wouldn't be worthy enough to wield the thing and just like obliterate a Kmart?
Prove yourself brave, truthful, and someday you will
obliterate a Kmart. Just seems risky. Speaking of risky, Odin drops Thor right in Jane's truck's way and she plows him with the truck. When he gets up, Jane's comedic relief sidekick, Darcy, tases Thor to unconsciousness. There's a weird disparity here between the fact that Thor is strong enough to survive a truck, but weak enough to be knocked out by a taser. Whatever. They take Thor to the hospital, where he immediately wakes up and kills a bunch of doctors until they inject his butthole with some sleepy drugs. Jane and her science-oriented friends determine Thor must have arrived via wormhole, which is the movie way of saying, if I know, shut up, nerds. At least they didn't fold a piece of paper and poke a hole through it.
When the spacecraft passes through the gateway.
Next, take a shortcut through.
Next.
Anyway, now Thor's tied up, but he escapes easily and immediately gets what? Women drivers, am I right, Dave? They can't drive for shit. You have to say that you hate women, Dave. It's for the clicks. Hey, Dave? Dave, I like that. Ultimately, they don't know where you are, but you're clearly sitting on the ground. So every time I have to look, I'm like, Dave. Elsewhere, a red pickup truck arrives with a sick-ass canted angle shot that'd make Orson Welles cream his desaturated XXL pants. That's right, Dave, a fat joke. Call me Taylor Swift. Apparently, this dude has pulled up to the Hammer crash site, and within minutes, the site is descended upon by a million rednecks tugging at Mjolnir like they're just coming from a viewing of Don't Worry Darling. That movie was sexy. Maybe. I only saw the trailers and the co-stars were spitting on each other and stuff. Speaking of getting spit on and tugging, here's Stan Lee, you perverts.
Did it work?
Speaking of, Thor is now hanging out with the nerds. It's very clear that he is not a nerd. I mean, look at that rock hard body. Yummy, yummy, yummy. I mean, sure. As far as they know, he's an actual schizophrenic who believes himself to be a literal god from another dimension, but also... I hope Jane's wearing floaties. Because of all the moisture. Speaking of, back in Asgard, Thor's gay friends.
Oh my god.
I'm not saying they're bad people. Look, they're gay, they're lubing each other up. You tell me, okay, come on. Whatever, Loki is clearly getting too excited. So he heads down to the museum to fondle some objects of immense power. Unfortunately, Loki's skin blues right alongside his balls, and Odin comes in and is like, yeah, okay, so here's the thing. I adopted you during the Frosty Wars because you were a sad, abandoned piece of frosty shit. And also because I thought we could make some sort of alliance out of it someday. This pisses Loki off so much that he yells at Odin until Odin dies. This is the great and all-powerful king who has ruled for 1 billion years? Does he have goddamn possum blood? Meanwhile, Thor is back on Earth, smashing coffee mugs and shit because he's so silly and he doesn't understand human customs. LMFAO!
Another!
Side note, I'm just done with fish out of water stories. If I see one more movie where an otherworldly character doesn't understand how to use a goddamn fork or whatever, I'm gonna do something drastic. Then Darcy takes a photo for Facebook. Between this and MySpace, it's clear these movies are nothing if not modern and timeless.
Smile.
Some redneck in the diner reveals the location of
Meow.
Thor, so he heads out to go grab his little buddy. Jane tries to get him to stop for some reason, but Thor doesn't listen. That imp. But when Jane and her friends head back to their lab or whatever, Agent Coulson and the SHIELD boys are ransacking their equipment and stealing everything, including a modern and timeless iPod. Jane is upset because they've confiscated and destroyed her life's work. But like, welcome to the club, Jane. Old foreign science man heads to the public library to send an email and ends up reading and giggling at a book on Norse mythology, as one does.
Take a look, it's in a book.
Back in Asgard, Loki lounges on the throne and he reveals to the harem that he is now the king and that Odin has fallen into the Odin sleep. Sort of like how every night I fall into the Jordan sleep so I don't have to talk to anybody. They ask to end their hunky bud's banishment and Loki shockingly says, no.
We're done.
Thor is off to get his hammer, and initially he tries to get a horse from a shelter, but because they don't have one, Jane picks him up and they head to the crash site, which is now a full-on science facility. And hey, that crater looks kind of familiar. Thor breaks into the facility and beats the ever-loving crap out of several innocent guards. I wonder if he's even aware of the existence of guns. Like, he has no special powers at this point. If even just one guard had the foresight to pull a trigger, Thor would be reduced to Norse paste within seconds. But thankfully, no, this is S.H.I.E.L.D., and their main contingency plan is to load a dickhead with a bow and arrow onto a crane and lift him up into the air to presumably snipe Thor like he was the queen or something. They also send a large black man to fight Thor, but unfortunately, that guy's kryptonite is glancing elbow blows to the body armor. Thor arrives at the hammer unarrowed as Coulson wants to see what it'll do, but Thor is apparently still unworthy, so he can't lift shit. This makes him sad, so they easily arrest him. It's such a sad scene that even Idris Elba in the sky seems a little put out. Coulson interrogates Thor and is about as intimidating as your dad asking you if you want to grab donuts later.
That's hurtful.
But then Loki shows up and is like, hey, just so you know, Dad is dead, and we have a truce with the Frosties that is contingent upon your continued banishment. Oh, and Mom thinks you're a piece of shit. Sorry, not sorry. On his way out, Loki tugs one out. Then he heads to Jotunheim and is like, hey, by the way, I'm the one that let your dudes into the museum way back when. And they're like, that's crazy. I had no idea. And Loki is like, yeah, so here's the deal. I'll let you in again to kill my dad. In exchange, you can have your casket of infinite snow power or whatever. And they're like, cool, sounds good. Deal. Thank you. Back on Earth, foreign scientist who, fine, is named Eric according to Wikipedia, shows up at the super secret science tent and manages to broker Thor's release, largely because S.H.I.E.L.D. wants to see where they go. Where they go is a bar, where they have a little heart-to-heart where Thor claims he doesn't want to hurt Jane, unless she's into it, obviously. And the scientist asks him to leave town, and then they chug beer together like a couple of fratty bros. But Eric drinks too much, so Thor carries him to Jane's trailer. But she was reading Eric's little Thor book, and the knock at the door startles her so badly, it's pretty clear that she was cranking it while looking at all those Thor illustrations. Which, I mean, fair. She pulls some rom-com manic pixie shenanigans.
I'm sorry.
Before the two head to the roof for a fireside chat, or a fire roof chat. Jane laments that all of her science information was in one notebook that S.H.I.E.L.D. took. But kids, you're probably not that great of a scientist if all of your research fits in a single moleskin. Thankfully, Thor managed to nick that little tome of knowledge from the research facility, and also helpfully explains to Jane how space is basically 9 realms connected by a tree.
The world's tree.
Earth to them is called Midgard because it's pretty shit compared to the other realms like Dankgard and Swagard. Hope that helps your research, Jane. Back in Thickgard,
Do not mistake my appetite for apathy!
They're all restless. So they go to Idris Elba to ask if he can shoot them down to Earth to grab Thor. And he says, usually, again like last time, usually I'd say no, but I'm just gonna walk away so you can do whatever you want. He is a shit guard.
Complicated fellow, isn't he?
This pisses off Loki, who summons and sends the Iron Giant. So now these dickheads are walking through this tiny New Mexico town, and I get that they haven't personally visited Earth before, but if it's truly one of the 9 realms, why are they all so goddamn stupid about it? And similarly, why doesn't Earth know about them? Why have they stayed away, and why did Odin choose Earth of all places to banish Thor? I feel like a 10-second Google search could have showed them that in this realm, only the worst of us dress in Renaissance fair digs.
Lightning bolt!
A sniper following Thor makes a kind of problematic joke about their looks.
We've got Xena, Jackie Chan, a master of magic.
Even weirder, when they walk in the door, Jane and Eric and Darcy all act shocked, like the existence of these weirdos somehow proves everything Thor has been saying.
I don't believe it.
Oh, excuse me.
They haven't demonstrated powers or anything yet. They just look stupid as shit.
Oh, excuse me.
And they're all like, wow, I guess this means all of Norse legend is real. Wait until they hear about LARPing.
Lightning bolt!
But Thor's buds tell Thor that his dad is actually alive, and that motivates Thor to try and go home, except, oops, Loki has frozen Idris Elba, which demonstrates just how powerful Loki has become because Idris Elba is very hot.
Come on, Chris.
You! Iron Giant shows up and blows up a bunch of S.H.I.E.L.D. dudes, and then heads into town to blow up all sorts of product placements. The gaggle of weirdos attempt some fancy throw maneuvers, neck stabbings, but nothing works. So Thor decides to epic slow walk up to confront the giant, even though he has no powers. And he even somehow talks to Loki, even though he's literally a full dimension away, and offers his life for the safety of everybody else. And then he gets walloped and dies. And Jane is just so sad that she's not gonna get to ride his little Mjolnir, but then Big Mjolnir's like, okay, fine, you're worthy now, and flies in and puts Thor's magic clothes back on. And also, Odin cries a single tear while napping. Helpful. Thanks, Dad. Thor flies up into a storm and does his cute little windmill thing, and I'm just gonna say it, his hammer should be way bigger. He looks pretty lame toting around a little meat mallet, but whatever, he kills the Iron Giant. Yeah. God. Meanwhile, the Frosties arrive to murder Odin. Mommy tries to fight them off, but it doesn't go great. But then Idris's hotness prevails. And he melts and he lets Thor and the boys back in Asgard, but not before Thor kisses several of Jane's body parts.
All wild boar.
Thor heads to his dad's bedroom and finds Loki blasting the Frosty King off his dad, after letting him ride him for a few seconds, of course. Loki's plan all along was to betray the Frost Giants and actually use the Bifrost thing to literally nuke Jotunheim in a glorious act of pure genocide to prove to his dad that he was worthy of being king. Honestly, not a bad plan, but also not very nice. Thor shows up and says, "This is madness." But Loki is all like, "Is it madness?" So they fight a bit with a few grunts and jump stabs. Yeah! But eventually Thor decides the only way to really stop the death of billions or whatever is to blow up the Rainbow Bridge. This prevents the Bifrost from killing everybody, but it also destroys his only chance at getting back to Earth and that sweet earthly puss. You know, it kind of feels like Thor maybe just stumbled on a plan to perform some morally righteous ghosting.
Goose.
Odin apparently wakes up and catches Thor and Loki before they fall off Asgard into space. I'm not sure of the physics here, but it does sort of appear that Asgard is a flat Earth. Nobody tell Kyrie Irving.
People think maybe your brain collapsed or something like that.
It didn't.
Loki gets sad and suicidally drops into space, and then they play the most delicate of pianos over Jane staring lustfully into the sky. But like I thought, Thor doesn't give a shit, and they throw a huge party even though they're now stranded forever and 1 million innocent people died, including one of the king's sons. Thor pulls Odin aside and says, "You're such a great dad," and Odin is like, "Yeah, I know," and no, he's not, dude. Thor was a piece of shit who instigated a massive war, and Loki is also a piece of shit who instigated a mass genocide. Thor eventually does the right thing, but it's not because of how he was raised or anything.
I'm not gonna cry about my pa. I'm gonna build an airport.
Odin should have spanked way more. Gone full Adrian Peterson on his ass. I'm good at sports jokes.
Where the are my hard-boiled eggs?
Thor then pulls Idris Elba aside, and Idris admits he's a bit of a pervert because he's been watching Jane from afar. They don't show us one of the many shower moments that Idris has definitely observed. But rather some lame shot of her doing science shit to try and get back to Thor. Then the Foo Fighters play over the credits. You know, the classic Norwegian rock band Foo Fighters.
I think I lost my way.
And the post-credits scene shows Eric meeting with Nick Fury, who reveals the Pulp Fiction suitcase is actually filled with a blue object of immense power that is not the blue object of immense power from the rest of the movie. I can see how that's confusing, but this is classic comic book shit. Keep up. Also, Loki is apparently alive and maybe mind-controlling Eric? That's not good. I could do this all day.
I know, we're both doing it all day. I've been here forever.
Yeah, I know. The movie about the whitest superhero opens appropriately during a whiteout snowstorm. A couple of dudes argue about what appears to be some sort of crashed UFO. Thankfully, they've got some fancy laser cutting tech, so they open a hole in the thing and hop down inside. And despite their clumsiness, they managed to discover a frozen Captain America shield. Sick! Now we once again travel back in time to once again Norway. God, Marvel loves Norway. Marvel is hard for Norway, Dave. Marvel probably wants to make love to Norway, Dave. You're not saying anything. Marvel wants to cup Norway's icy balls, Dave. This is the 1942 version of Norway. And we watch a dude run into a church and yell some things before the wall gets punched by a big-ass tank. And up drives Elrond in a car with a weird dead octopus on it. Apparently, the years since the Fourth Age have gone so badly, he became a friggin' Nazi.
Welcome to Rivendell.
You can even see some scars around his up ears, presumably from his anti-elf ear surgery.
Call me elf one more time.
It is tough to see a good dude fall so hard. Anyway, he convinces Filch to tell him about a secret compartment in the wall holding the weird cube from the Thor post-credits that Nazi Rond calls the Tesseract and the Jewel of Odin's treasure room. Then he shoots Filch because apparently he's one of those mean Nazis.
Gorley?
Smash cut to a bunch of naked boys reading a newspaper. The hottest new fetish since dipping a gamer MILF's feet in hobby sauce, and the littlest boy is named Steve Rogers, and he appears to be 11 years old. But that doesn't stop him from applying to be in the big boy army. He is immediately rejected, however, because this is the face the doctor makes when looking at Steve's ween. A bit later, Steve gets the shit beaten out of him in an alley despite employing the ever-effective trash can lid shield strategy. Thankfully, his buddy Bucky shows up in full uniform and kicks the mean bully right in his uptight butthole. He mentions that Steve should probably stop trying to lie and enlisting over and over, and then he invites Steve to go dancing with him because it's Bucky's last night before he heads to fight in World War II, but like on a double date with girls. 2 girls. This isn't Asgard.
What?
Turns out the dance is at the 1943 Stark Expo, where Tony's old daddy Stark has built a car that can't hover. Very Elon of him. Tesla. Steve doesn't want to dance with girls.
What?
So he tries to enlist at the local fair enlistment center or whatever. He says a lot of brave, courageous things, despite being such a tiny boy. And a concerned German, but not Nazi scientist overhears and asks Steve if he wants to kill German, but definitely Nazi soldiers.
Kill some Nazis.
Steve pulls a MAGA and asks if this is some kind of trick question, to which the scientist says, no, do you want to kill Nazis? And Steve says, I don't want to kill anybody. There's good people on both sides. But man, I sure do hate bullies. And that's enough for the scientists. So just like that, baby boy Steve is approved to only kill the mean bully Nazis.
This is troubleshoot.
Meanwhile, in a frozen Nazi mountain lair, Elrond and a little boy scientist, but like an old Benjamin Button boy scientist of his own, run some experiments on the Tesseract that they're pretty worried won't work, but they do work, so it's all good.
I must congratulate you on it.
Apparently, they've harnessed the power of the Tesseract into a lantern thing. Wolfenstein!
I like your style, Americans.
But okay, now Steve is in Europe, and fortunately, his division is being run by a sexy British lady named Agent Carter, who talks as politely as she punches hard. As it turns out, weak-ass Steve sucks at most things to the point that when he does jumping jacks, the angels cry. Or at least Tommy Lee Jones does.
He's making me cry.
But it doesn't matter because Tommy Lee Jones is a damn lunatic and hucks a grenade at his soldiers, and while everybody else runs away, Steve jumps on what he believes is a live explosive. Now that's very noble, Steve, but it's unlikely your girlish figure would really soak up much of the blast. As always, A for effort, but D+ for execution. And whatever. It's enough to convince the scientist, and see, the thing is, he has developed a super serum that can make people super soldiers, but there's a weird morality ingredient in there that causes the thing to amplify a person's qualities. If they're good, they get extra good, and they get extra good and extra strong. And if they're mean, they become extra strong still, but also more mean.
Is this a test?
This is what happened to Elrond back in the day, but in this movie he's called Schmidt.
So, Nectar?
He took the serum before it was finished, and it kind of made him crazy.
That's a sad one.
Now this scientist is telling all this stuff to Steve while plying him with alcohol, which kind of looks like a grooming thing, but oh, it's actually it's okay because he doesn't let Steve drink anyway, and he drinks it all by himself after toasting to my balls.
To the little guys.
By the way, the CG used to make Chris Evans look like a baby boy is kind of amazing. Like legitimately seamless and still holds up. I guess it was easier to do that when Marvel animators had years to work on a film instead of being forced to entirely animate She-Hulk twerk scenes over a short lunch. The next day, Steve rides in a car with Miss Carter and admits that he's not great with the ladies, and it certainly doesn't help that his entire head could fit inside one of her breasts. But before he can say that part out loud, they arrive at an antique store in Brooklyn, which secretly houses a secret lab full of secrets. They try and take a picture of Steve scrawny and clothed, but the scientist is like,
Please, not now.
he's about to be naked and jacked, Larry. Just wait a goddamn second. You'll get a great photo in a second.
It's a little big.
They strap Steve down and Daddy Stark pulls some levers, and then Steve gets injected with a bunch of blue shit before getting locked into some sort of Iron Maiden with Bioshock aesthetics. And speaking of, Steve is then blasted by Vita rays, which is almost certainly a plasmid power, and he starts screaming but says it's all good, keep going. I can do this! The lab sparks, as labs do in movies whenever an experiment happens, but then it stops. And the Maiden opens to reveal Steve is now jacked, and Carter even touches Steve's swollen wet tit just to see if it's real. But then, oh no! A German assassin sets off an explosion, steals a vial of serum, and shoots the kindly scientist to death. But not before the scientist also gets a chance to touch Steve's wet booby. But here's the weird thing. That bomb was placed where literally all of the US High Command was sitting just moments ago. If the assassin had detonated it 2 minutes earlier, he'd have wiped out tons of high-ranking officials. He could have delayed America creating its first super soldier by messing with the experiment, but no. He waits until Steve got his full rogering and for the military officials to safely vacate their seats. Not great planning, hair dumbass.
You're butchering my beautiful language.
The assassin's got bigger issues, like this grandma with a machine gun. Oop, no longer a problem.
Caleb is dead.
Just like my grandma. Anyway, after approximately 45 minutes of mourning the loss of his scientist buddy, Big Steve finally lumbers up and chases the assassin. Except he's a little unsure of how to use his newfound speed. Ultimately, it's fine, because he runs as fast as a car and can jump from car roof to car roof like an agent in Matrix Reloaded. Also, he continues to use makeshift shields like that's the most natural thing in the world. Eventually, the assassin kidnaps a kid, throws him in the water, and then himself hops into some sort of crazy advanced submarine, but Steve jumps in too and punches out a window and throws the guy back up on land, breaking the stolen serum vial and apparently losing the secret to creating more serum forever, somehow. Oh no. Then the dude says Hail Hydra, which is either the organization he works for or his favorite Pokemon. Hail.
Hey, Dragon, you've got to come down!
And cyanides himself. They don't really have any leads on where the guy was from or what's going on, so they decide to reassign Steve to fight the war on not having enough money. He basically becomes walking propaganda to help sell war bonds. And why do they give him a shield? Whose idea was that? Steve's? Why? I don't know. But they also heavily feature it in the dude's comic books and movies because I guess the people need something to latch on to. Maybe it's a merchandising opportunity. Kids love shields.
Awesome.
Yeah. Check out this moment, 10 minutes before he loses his virginity.
Captain America!
Unfortunately, straight male soldiers are less enthused by his whole act.
Gay!
And it makes Steve so sad, he sketches a monkey, which reveals that actually, Steve probably should have gone into making comic books. That drawing is actually pretty great, even if it's a metaphor as ham-fisted as that time the farmer shoved his entire arm up Babe's ass. You remember that scene?
In Babe, or?
Yeah, it's Babe 2.
I don't remember that.
This is Babe.
Babe in the city?
Yeah, when he gets a whole farmer. Then Agent Carter shows up and is like, by the way, your buddy Bucky is captured. You should probably mount an off-the-books rescue mission. Steve is like, sounds good. I don't want to get fisted like Babe. What? Elsewhere, a bunch of Nazis tell Schmidt that Hitler's getting kind of impatient, so he shoots them. Which kind of makes him a hero? Well, he's an anti-hero, right? Fighting Nazis is good, kids. No matter what your weird uncle tells you.
You will be punished for your insolence.
Back to the mission. Steve is in an airplane flown by Stark, and Carter is there too, and they have kind of a moment.
Fondue.
And then Steve jumps out and infiltrates a labor camp that's building tons of blue weapons and shit. He is, of course, still carrying a big-ass shield emblazoned with the American flag. That's about as conspicuous as it gets, bub. Sort of defeats the whole infiltrating thing. But thankfully, there are several prisoners, including American Sherlock Holmes, I guess. I'm not sure how you explain wearing a bowler hat to war. Jailbreak! They only get but so far before Schmidt notices and hits the alarm. That's right, Schmidt hits the alarm because apparently he's the main security guard.
What does security do about it?
Feels like you should really delegate that, bro. He also presses his own self-destruct buttons, which is probably something he should be in charge of. Don't want some dickhead in a bowler hat making that kind of decision. Speaking of, midlife crisis man steals a big-ass magic tank and starts blowing stuff up. While Steve sneaks further into the base and finds an apparently recently tortured and or laid strapped down Bucky. Oh my God. As they escape, Steve confronts Schmidt and has no qualms about essentially sucker punching the man in his face.
We have to fight with our bodies.
The bad scientist presses a button that separates the two super soldiers, and Schmidt pulls his face off to reveal he's got a red skull. So I guess be aware of that. Mr. Skull escapes in a weird helicopter rocket while the scientist escapes via car, and CP performs an explosion jump worthy of Teddy Roosevelt. America! But we don't actually know if everybody escaped because Tommy Lee Jones and Agent Carter have yet to see any information supporting their continued existence from reconnaissance planes, but then how good they show up. So how shitty are these planes that they didn't notice 300 dudes in a big-ass tank lumbering through cleared sections of the woods approaching their actual camp? Thank God they're a friendly mass of soldiers and mechanized weaponry and not, you know, like a bad mass. For his technically illegal and insubordinate actions, Steve is to receive a medal, but oops, he doesn't show up.
Captain, that's your cue.
Where did he go? Why did they think he was going to show up if he's not even in the area? Is he just taking a dump at the wrong time? I don't know. But Stan Lee is there.
Shove it up your butt.
And after he's fully cleared of massive amounts of super poop created by what Carter claims is a 4x metabolism, Steve remembers seeing a map with a bunch of Hydra-based locations on it. So, Steve gathers a team of racially and mentally diverse misfits and attacks those bases one by one to lure the Red Skull out of hiding. Carter shows up at the bar looking hot as hell for no reason except maybe she's flirting with me? Is this for me, Haley Atwell? Like and subscribe and I'll hit you up. I mean, for like an interview or something. I'm married, Haley.
Sounds good.
Speaking of horny women, Steve goes to grab some gear for his big fun destruction romp, but before he can go in the room, he's groped by a Tyrell. But then, oh no, there's Agent Carter there too.
That's a pity.
Call Steve Bermuda, cause he's caught in a triangle. Anyway, Stark shows him some new shield options because I guess they're all resigned to this being his thing, but Steve notices a cooler shield under the table that Stark tries to get him to not use because it's just a prototype. But when Steve asks what it's made of, Stark says it's the
Rarest metal on Earth.
Now, I don't know much about prototypes, but I don't think 50 pounds of incredibly rare metal counts as just a test.
Kind of attached?
But that's it. It's just a shield. That's what it does. And look, it stops bullets from angry, horny women firing guns with abandon and with no worry for ricochets in a crowded area. How very police of her. Fight montage, including this one dude who was apparently sitting in a tree by himself, praying that the captain's team would just pass underneath him without noticing. Also, let's just say it. It's nice to have a superhero with no qualms just firing a pistol like a champ. Much of Steve's antics are recorded on 1940s cameras so goddamn crisp, they can clearly display Captain America's wank material to the good folks back home. We're getting to that point, Dave. My mouth is starting to slow down.
Well.
Now they embark on a zipline train heist, as one does, and Steve, Bucky, and another guy hop aboard. Inside, they find a boss bad guy. Oh, actually, he's dead. But Bucky is locked on the other side of the door, fighting regular goons. Oh, actually, the boss guy isn't dead. You forgot to double tap him, Steve.
This is the moment when the supposedly dead killer comes back to life for one last time.
So Steve kills him again, but shit. He blew a hole open in the train and Bucky falls out like a goober. Rip Bucky. Then the third guy who went with them finally gets to the front of the train and captures the bad doctor. Smash cut to Tommy Lee Jones delivering the doc a yummy steak meal in jail. The plot twist, the doctor has a weak tummy that doesn't handle meat, so old Tommy Iron Stomach chomps the steak instead.
Cow.
Tommy reveals that they've leaked a message to Schmidt that says that the doctor has already given up a bunch of information, so he might as well give up the information because Schmidt will be mad and he'll try to kill him either way.
Cry about that, you dirty old bitch.
And that sounds clever, except that if Schmidt knows he's been compromised, won't that cause him to change his plans, or at least his location? Like, now whatever information the Americans do get will already be old, and Schmidt will have a head start.
We gotta go. My cold. The bees are back.
But whatever, it works, and Doc gives up the information on Schmidt's secret lair and the fact that they've only got 24 hours to stop him from carrying out some sort of master plan. Hey, speaking of, I don't know, Nazi plans, were there ever any repercussions for killing all those Hitler dudes a bunch of months ago? I get that Hitler's been pounding a lot of bull semen at this point, but it's been a long time since Schmidt went rogue. Seems like Hitler would be more worried about it.
What?
Carter goes to tell Steve the news at the same bar as earlier that's been bombed out, and Steve is like, I'm sad, because I can't get drunk now. And also, yeah, my best friend died. And Carter's like, whatever, dude, you gotta attack the Alps. And Steve is like, fine. Steve's plan appears to be to drive straight at the base front door with a motorcycle-themed Return of the Jedi homage with a little James Bond homage from then, and then evidently allow himself to be captured in a Dark Knight homage. Hi. He also at one point places his shield in like the motorcycle basket or whatever as he drives straight at a tank, which like, I don't care how rare that metal is, bruh. The motorcycle is made out of very tank-susceptible materials. Also, how is Steve so good at throwing the shield? I get that he's like really strong, but I assume you'd still need a ton of training to accurately throw a shield of that size, like a friggin' boomerang? Is that something baked into the serum they never explicitly mention, alongside penis enlargement and moral fortitude?
I can't get drunk.
Whatever. Before Schmidt can kill Steve, his buddies zipline in through the window. That was the plan all along. You see, Steve had to be captured, or else, I mean, there'd be nobody else in the room when they zipped in. This plan relies heavily on dramatic effect. Also, then everybody else just charges the front gate that Steve came through. Not a lot of plan in this plan. America! Yeah! But anyway, Schmidt runs away and boards one of his big-ass planes, but unfortunately, a plane that size needs to taxi for approximately 50 miles before it can actually heave its massive plane buttocks off the ground, which gives Steve just enough time to hop in a car driven by Tommy Lee, kiss Carter, and board the thing's landing gear. Cap discovers several bombs spray painted with the names of the cities they're intended to explode. Effective organization strategy. But actually, apparently dudes are supposed to fly the bombs manually? Is that advanced tech? Seems worse than what they already had with bombs? I don't know, but Steve hops in one that's leaving and turns it around to fly into the ship's anus at an extremely high speed that probably should have resulted in everything exploding, but thankfully nothing comes. Blows up.
There it is.
Steve heads to the control room or whatever, and he and Schmidt fight for a while and break a lot of important shit that causes the plane to spiral and also the Tesseract to pop out of a console. Schmidt picks up the Tesseract and it yeets his maroon ass into space. Probably should have dropped it on the ground, my dude. So now Steve flies the plane himself and decides that he needs to crash the thing into Antarctica before it blows up New York City. First question, since when is Antarctica on the way to New York City from the Alps? And second question, why does he need to crash land the thing so immediately and so desperately? Why not fly it in circles for a while until they come up with a better plan? Don't people have to fly the bombs manually? Can he not do a water landing? Why does he need to die for this plan to work?
I have seen the future, Captain.
I don't know, but everybody seems to agree that the plan makes sense. So Steve and Carter have sexy, sad, flirty banter while he goes down with the ship.
I'll show you how.
And Carter gives Steve's weak ass picture one last longing look. And then cut to a bunch of dumb Brits celebrating and Stark finding the Tesseract, presumably while searching for Steve. And oh, look at that. Steve wakes up in some sort of medical room with shoes on? That's unusual. There's a baseball game on the radio and a 1940s lady walks in and Steve is like, something's wrong. I was at this baseball game. And he busts out of the room, which is actually just sitting in a warehouse like a leftover to the rehearsal prop.
I transported a fake bar across the country from New York to Oregon just because I didn't want to throw it away.
And he runs out the door into modern day New York City, and Nick Fury walks up and is like, yeah, we were hoping to ease you into it slowly. See, you've been frozen for 7 years, and that kept you alive. Because, you know, a logic reason, a science reason. You get it.
I'll analyze it with science.
Then, in the post-credits, Steve punches a bag and Nick gives him a job. And in this economy, he'd better be grateful. Holy shit, it's me, but different. Do you want to join forces? Do you want to help me out? My throat really hurts. Nah.
Ouch.
Big and green and buck-ass nude.
So to start, our traditional production titles are all dissolving into Tesseracts, or maybe GameCube logos. A voiceover informs us that the Tesseract has been awakened or whatever, while we see Loki walking around with a staff and an alien army named the Chitauri gets name dropped. There's also a dude in space sitting on a throne but facing away. How very my old boss of him. Now, we're at some sort of big-ass science facility that's actively being evacuated because of the aforementioned Tesseract awakening. Everybody except Coulson, who'd be out here looking like a cucumber. And that he's cool, and also not very physically appealing.
Without this oven mitt on my head, I just wouldn't be cool.
Fury shows up on a helicopter and asks how bad it is, apparently failing to notice all the running people.
That's the problem, sir.
Coulson is like, the Tesseract turned itself on, and I'm like, I feel you, Tesseract. Sometimes we do what we gotta.
I have now come.
And Fury's like, we need to get every part of Phase 2 onto a truck, presumably referring to like Thor 2 and Avengers 2, and all the other great Phase 2 movies to come.
I have now come.
Why? Dr. Eric is down in the main lab trying, and failing, to figure out what the hell is going on with the Tesseract, while Barton sits literally like 8 stories in the air just watching. They ask him to please come down, you dumb bitch, and he does, but he's like, I actually see better from up there. And like, no you don't, you idiot. It's a malfunctioning orb of power. What are you learning sitting real far away from it?
No one's coming.
The cube freaks out and opens up a portal to the other end of space, which sucks. And what double sucks is that Loki comes through instead of like Matthew McConaughey or something. And they tell him to put down the spear, but surprisingly, the man who just traveled across all of existence says, and is apparently bulletproof himself, which is quite useful in this exact scenario. But why is he so sweaty? Like even before the stabbing, he just shows up sweaty. Is Loki the before on a sports stick ad? Somewhere in all this, Loki pokes Barton's chest and mind controls him somehow. Fury puts the Tesseract in a suitcase in the hopes of something, but Loki obviously notices him and says what I always say when my wife asks why I'm playing through XCOM 2 on the hardest difficulty again.
I am burdened with glorious purpose.
Then Loki mind controls the scientist, and really he should just hurry up and explode Fury. And eventually, yeah. Barton, the crack shot, can never miss sniper, shoots Fury in the chest, where his body armor is. So Fury lives. Then Loki rides, what's the opposite of shotgun? Winchester? Butterfly knife, whoopee cushion, in the back of a pickup. Presumably because his big ass spear won't fit in the main cab. Kind of a weird way to transport a god, but whatever, it works, I guess. This, of course, sets off an action sequence where Robin from How I Met Your Mother chases after Loki, and there's driving and shooting. And at one point, she drives in reverse. Because that's how you know this is a real action movie with a real action driving sequence. Cars usually go front part first, you see. I'm a real car head. While that's happening, the Tesseract finally collapses the entire facility, which mildly shocks Coulson. Now, a Fury-flown helicopter enters the chat, but shit crashed. Apparently, all of this means we're now at level 7, which presumably means war. Not sure what the other levels are, but 7 is very serious. Glad we're no longer at level 3, aggressive and confusingly sexual tickling. Meanwhile, in Russia, mean Ruski boys smack around sexy Lady Natasha from Iron Man 2. They have a conversation, but my torrented video did not include subtitles, so let's assume that that part's not important. She seems pretty scared, but then Coulson calls the phone of one of the bad guys and demands to speak to Natasha, and he obliges because Coulson claims that there's an F-22 8 miles away that could blow them up. But aren't they in Russia? How is there an F-22 just flying around without everybody flipping the hell out? Would this not create an international incident? Bullseye, holy shit. I don't know, but Natasha's like, nah, man, Coulson, I was getting information out of them. But Coulson is like, sorry, we need you to do something else. So she kills everybody in the room, as one does. Caleb is dead. Then she's sent to India to coax Bruce Banner out of hiding. And how does she do this? Well, she hires a small child to pretend to need medical attention. Kind of weird, but effective.
Should have got paid up front, Banner.
It's apparent that Banner's time in India has dramatically altered his appearance. He went from looking like Edward Norton to Mark Ruffalo. It's okay. Must be all that tikka masala. It can mess you up if it's too spicy, or if you're too white.
Is tikka masala the one that was invented in Scotland?
Probably. Natasha succeeds in bringing Bruce in by promising him that they only want his big science brain to help them track the Tesseract. They don't need him as an uncontrollable rage monster, and he's like, okay, good, because I don't do that anymore. Jim wink at the camera.
So Fury isn't after the monster.
Not that he's told me.
Meanwhile, Fury appears to be playing a game of Guess Who with a bunch of old white people. I know somebody in the comments right now is freaking out that I mentioned being white twice in 2 paragraphs in this insanely long video, but I think it'll be okay. We can work through this tough time together. Fury again mentions Phase 2 and how it's not ready and how he wants to bring the team together in the meantime, presumably referring to the Avengers initiative they've since put on ice after everybody they had tried to recruit turned out to be pretty much insane.
You can't afford me.
And now we get that Captain America post-credit scene again, and Fury recruits Steve Rogers again and claims they want to use the Tesseract to create unlimited clean energy. But I'm a little surprised that in 70 years with the thing, they haven't figured that out yet.
I'm skeptical.
The German scientists in the 40s essentially cracked that problem, and yet all of America's brightest minds spread over a near century have nothing?
Missing.
Maybe we should have been nicer to the Nazis.
$10 says you're wrong.
Elsewhere, Iron Man welds a pipe or whatever in an effort to remove his big new New York City tower from the city's power grid to instead utilize some personalized, self-sustaining clean energy. He and Potts are clearly still dating now, but Coulson interrupts their flirting in an effort to speak to Tony, but not before being extremely embarrassed by Potts whispering to Tony that she'll let him lick her goop later.
I basically love anything that comes in a hot dog bun, except hot dogs.
Elsewhere, Loki has established some sort of sewer base where Eric and the boys work on the Tesseract. Loki takes a moment to use his staff to chat with the main Chitauri dude again and show us his f***ed up hand. It's one of those classic superhero movie scenes where 2 villains catch up in the middle of the movie to recap what their plans are just in case the audience has totally forgotten. Easily could have been an email, but this way we can add 5 to 10 minutes to the runtime and $10 million to the f***ed up hand budget. All the heroes eventually convene on some big-ass shield aircraft carrier when it takes off into the air and becomes invisible. Naturally, this is only possible because Nick Fury is Star Trekking the hell out of the main deck.
Space.
So now, they're sailing across the breeze like a Treasure Planet outtake. They don't know me. And Coulson admits in their effort to track down the Tesseract,
we're sweeping every wirelessly accessible camera on the planet. Cell phones, laptops. If it's connected to a satellite, it's eyes and ears for us.
So that's nice. They also casually mention there are plenty of people working for Loki of their own free will because a lot of people hate S.H.I.E.L.D. Ha! I wonder why.
This is wrong.
I've got to find this man.
And yet their freedom-smothering strategy works, and they locate Loki, headed to Germany and looking fly as hell. Barton steals some iridium that'll help stabilize the Tesseract or whatever, and Loki breaks into an event to steal a dude's eyeball for the retinal scanner that Barton needs to get through or whatever, and that all works great. And then Loki turns back into an ass, guardian-looking piece of shit, and blows up a cop car, which is actually pretty based. Then he makes everybody in the area kneel to him so they can listen to his monologue about how he'll be king or whatever someday, but he's speaking English to a bunch of Germans. They probably have no idea what the hell he's talking about.
Is this not your natural state?
Then Cap shows up and they fight. And then Iron Man shows up and then they fight more. And eventually Loki surrenders in what's sure to be a classic Joker move. But then, oops, Thor shows up out of nowhere and steals Loki. How did Thor return? What, with the Bifrost exploded? Well, Odin maybe used a lot of magic, Loki speculates, with a hand wave, so...
Somehow Odin thought in return.
Thor basically says to Loki that he sucks and he wants to take him home, but Iron Man and Captain America chase those Asgards down, but not before Cap shares his extremely tepid theology.
There's only one God, man, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that.
Iron Man and Thor fight for a bit with just the most thrilling invincible no damage punching this side of that dude in Elden Ring smacking a wall 50 times looking for a maiden. Then Cap shows up and yells, "Stop!" and his shield somehow withstands a full smack from Thor's hammer. And everybody's like, fine, let's be friends. Meanwhile, Loki apparently refused to run away because, again, he's pulling a Joker. They throw Loki in a sexy glass prison, and Fury threatens to drop the whole cell out of the floor if he does anything bad, but like, he's literally a god.
Well, let me know if real power wants a magazine or something.
I'm sure he could survive free fall. He's survived significantly harder hits already, but apparently the cage is meant for Hulk, another definitely invincible character. They've really thought through how to kill invincible characters, dropping them. Later, Natasha comes in to talk to Loki, and she manipulates him into revealing that part of Loki's plan is to piss Banner off and unleash Hulk on board the ship. Loki allowed himself to be captured so he could sow discord. Classic Joker move, called it. Natasha also mentions that she sort of owes Barton a life debt or whatever. So everybody on the Not Yet team kind of compares notes, and they all realize that Loki's plan is clearly to use the Tesseract to create another portal that'll let his little army through. They also speculate that S.H.I.E.L.D. has not been exactly forthcoming about what they want to use the Tesseract for, since if they really cared about clean energy, they'd probably have asked Tony about it.
That guy's brain is a bag full of cats.
Of course, if they were developing weapons, they also would have asked Tony about it, right? You know, the weapons developer that consults for them.
You could smell crazy on him.
Speaking of, Cap finds some weapons. Ah, crap. Turns out phase 2 is guns and weapons of mass destruction. Fury admits they were looking for a way to fight back against aliens, even though their use of the Tesseract is actually what attracted a bunch of those aliens and shit to Earth in the first place. Karma? She's a bitch, I'm a lover. But before they can really dig into their feelings, it turns out Loki's staff is some sort of tracking device, and Barton and company attack the helicarrier with arrows. They knock out one of the engines, and the S.H.I.E.L.D. crew worry that if another goes, they'll drop out of the sky. So then Tony and Cap head to fix the damaged engine, and Tony keeps being like, "Tienes que arreglar a moto," and Cap is like,
"Speak English."
He also shoots a rifle a bunch, but isn't the most accurate marksman. While Natasha unsuccessfully tries to convince Banner not to become the Hulk.
Walk away and never ever.
Hulk smashes a bunch of shit until Thor shows up and intervenes with Mjolnir. That happens to be pretty effective because Hulk apparently can't get it up. Then S.H.I.E.L.D. attacks Hulk with a fighter jet, which causes him to jump out and blow it up, which of course causes him to fall to the ground and away from the main action. Then Barton fires a classic hacker arrow at a computer, which shuts down another one of the engines, causing the big old airboat to fall towards the hard ground. Loki tricks Thor into his cage, and Natasha knocks Barton unconscious. Then Coulson shows up with a big gun.
Even I don't know what it does.
And immediately gets stabbed. Loki then threatens Thor with free fall, but again, that dude can fly and is invincible. Why am I the only person that knows this? Thor does get dropped, but he survives. What are the odds? Speaking of, Coulson isn't fully dead himself, so he shoots Loki with his big gun. But obviously he doesn't really do anything because, again, the dude is invincible. Stop trying to make scenes like that cool. If that gun could kill Loki, the movie would randomly end somewhere in the middle. So the mostly unfazed Loki escapes, and the pretty phased Coulson but thankfully Captain Stark fixed one of the engines so the ship stops falling. The team reconvenes, but is sad, and Fury throws a bunch of bloody Captain America trading cards on the table and is like, these were Coulson's, and everybody's like, damn, we should Avengers Coulson. But when they leave, Robin's like, dude, those were in his locker, and Fury's like, look girl, get off my back.
They needed the push.
Is that what the kids are calling it these days?
But doesn't that mean that he literally dipped them in Coulson's blood? Or did he just have some spare blood in the back in case he needed to dip things into it for motivational purposes? I think Fury is insane.
Excuse me.
But so, okay, here's where everybody else is now. Thor wanders around in a prairie and plays with his hammer. Banner wakes up, no longer green nor big, but still
buck-ass nude.
Barton wakes up and is no longer mind-controlled because he was knocked unconscious, apparently. Natasha's there with him. Stark the narcissist realizes Loki the narcissist is probably going to attack Stark Tower in New York City, so Barton agrees to fly everybody that's still on the ship to stop the attack.
Son?
Of course, brain-controlled Eric is already opening the portal on top of Stark Tower, and the thing has a damn near invincible force field protecting it. Eric, though, not so much. Loki and Stark talk for a minute until Loki throws him out a window, but it's all good because a new Iron Man suit catches him before he becomes Tony Splat. Nice. Meanwhile, a beam of pure blue energy opens a portal in the sky and lets a bunch of friggin' aliens through who just start massacring civilians in lieu of an actual targeted military strike. How very Russian of them. But seriously, what's the plan? Just kill everybody and hope Earth surrenders? Surely it'd make more sense to target military bases or the White House or anything besides random office buildings.
I also found out that it's incredibly illegal to say something like the best place to fire a mortar launcher at the White House would be from the roof of the Rockefeller Hewitt building because of minimal security and you'd have a clear line of sight to the president's bedroom. Insanely illegal.
The aliens even unleash a huge evil space turtle worm, but again, the strategy remains killing everybody at H&R Block for some reason.
You switch to H&R Block. Can I just say, I love that for you.
I don't understand it, but now Thor has shown up to fight Loki, and Loki jumps at him with a terrifying roar. Loki stabs Thor, but as you might expect, this does jack shit. He is invincible.
2 seconds later.
But Loki escapes on a speeder bike. Barton, Natasha, and Cap also show up and are immediately shot down right in front of a car that my mom drives, actually. Got over 200,000 miles on that thing. It's still going strong, so I guess I can't fault this bit of product placement. Also, the team whispers some plans to each other, but then Natasha starts shooting aliens that are in front of her, which implies that she was hunkered down facing the aliens the whole time. Why didn't they blow her away? Whatever. Cap leaves this engagement to organize the cops in a civilian evacuation attempt, which I suppose is a good use of his talents. I mean, I don't know if I would trust the cops to know the difference between a heavily armed alien and any other random innocent unarmed civilian, but whatever. Thor shows up and nobody's surprised even though he somehow fell out of the boat in the impossible death trap of death, and then Banner shows up and is like, I can transform into Hulk whenever I want because I'm always angry and super in control.
That's my secret, Cap. I'm always
John Cena! Even though he literally wasn't in control when he transformed into Hulk like 15 minutes ago and almost killed everybody on board the helicarrier, but whatever. He punches a turtle to death, and then we get an epic hero team-up shot, including Natasha standing there with a basic-ass pistol. This moment reportedly caused a couple 100,000 nerds to be admitted to the hospital with severe creaming injuries when the movie's released in theater. Happened to you, right, Dave? His pants were never the same.
Just like Budapest all over again.
You and I remember Budapest very differently.
The battle begins again in earnest, and hopefully the Avengers win soon because Hulk's fighting style is just freaking obliterating New York City. Just him walking around flattens a bodega every step.
I love that for you.
Thor goes to lightning strike the portal, and Natasha, for her part, realizes she can probably only do so much with her little baby pistol. So she jumps up to grab a passing spaceship speeder and gets her arm ripped entirely off. I mean, she is only human after all. Oh, she successfully grabs a hold and flips up. Is she secretly serumed up as well? Let's put a pin in this. Cap, for his part, gets his mask ripped off by an alien hell-bent on seeing Chris Evans' full, beautiful, all-American cheeks. Barton shoots down Loki before Matrix reloading off a roof, and Hulk smashes Loki in perhaps the most enduring and memorable MCU scene of all time. Of course, it doesn't really feel like this should hurt Loki as much as it does, but it's pretty funny, so we'll leave it alone.
Puny God.
Tony shares some Bible stories with Jarvis.
You ever hear the tale of Jonah?
Yes.
And blows up a turtle from the inside like the Holy Spirit transforming your heart.
Have any of you heard the story of a man named Jonah?
Eric finally wakes up and he too is no longer mind controlled thanks to his unconsciousness. But if unconsciousness is the main way to unmind control somebody, does that mean that Loki has to keep his subjects awake the whole time? Like, have Eric and Barton been awake for like a week? That sounds like the most horrific hell a human could endure. How are they awake now? Seems like as soon as Loki lost control, they'd pass out for 3 days. I don't know. But Eric suggests they used Loki's abandoned staff to destroy the portal. But if the staff is the one thing that can destroy the portal and subsequently Loki's entire plan, seems like he shouldn't have brought it into battle. Especially if he's gonna just abandon it once things get iffy. It's like Biden charging into Ukraine with all of our nuclear codes duct taped to his chest. Stay at home, Brandon. Elsewhere, the Guess Who's order a nuclear weapon to be launched in New York City. Obviously, this is a terrible and insane idea, but also extremely early in the battle. The Air Force hasn't even scrambled fighters yet. Like, give us a chance.
Nice.
We got a half dozen circus freaks largely holding their own, but at some point the US military will show up and do some damage. It feels extremely early to just obliterate your largest city and kill millions and millions of your own people. There it is. Oh.
It's a stupid ass decision.
Also, are they not the military? Why would they have to order Fury to shoot a nuke? Why does S.H.I.E.L.D. have access to multiple nuclear weapons? Why are they allowed to act unilaterally? Is the president one of those Guess Who's? Who decides what organizations get those? Does the CDC have them? Does the IRS? I'm scared, Dave.
I love that for you.
To be fair, Fury is like, yeah, I'm not doing that. But apparently the Guess Who's have a back channel to the pilots because they send 2 fighters off to murder millions of Americans despite Fury's wild shooting of a rocket launcher at their nuclear weapons. Whatever. Natasha helps Eric shut down the portal with the scepter, but not before Tony yoinks a nuke out of midair and redirects it into the alien mothership or whatever. The resultant explosion both knocks Tony out and causes every alien to collapse for some unexplained hive mind reason that has not been mentioned or foreshadowed in any way that I've noticed. Natasha fully closes the portal right as Tony falls through, and Hulk catches him before he becomes Tony Splat. Did I make that joke yet? Ha!
What just happened?
Again, how does Hulk have so much self-control? Seems pretty arbitrary.
All right, hey. All right, good job, guys.
Hey, if the nuke was actually enough to destroy the entire enemy force, why didn't they just consider that as the original plan? Like, they could have flown the fighter right up there and shot through the hole like a slightly less suicidal Randy Quaid.
I'm back!
Hell, send 50 fighters and 50 nukes. The enemies are out in space somewhere. No harm, no foul. Why was their first instinct to blow up the city itself? I don't know. The Avengers assemble for a sick-ass rap album cover in front of Loki with Barton and his arrow front and center.
Yeah.
Would an arrow kill Loki? An explosive arrow right in his face did almost literally nothing, but sure, Barton, very threatening.
All I need is my natty light.
We see some news clips, including Stan Lee and a Democratic senator trying to blame the damage on our heroes. And speaking of, they all pretty much go their separate ways. Thor takes Loki and the Tesseract back to Asgard by using the Tesseract's power somehow, and the others go other places. I don't know. Tony still seems pretty out in the open in public, but the others are hiding, maybe. And that's it, except, ooh, looks like this was directed by Joss Whedon. Yikes, that just happened. Then we get a post-credits scene where the team all silently eat shawarma and Cap covers his face because he'd grown a beard for a new movie and they needed to cover it. It's the same reason I'm still wearing pants. Can you just give me a budget now? I feel like I've earned it. I'm utterly debased. Talking about Marvel shit for money. That's what everybody does.
Not yet.
Damn it! So, for no apparent reason other than to explain what happened to all the cool guns that fell on the ground after the glorious explosive nuclear finale to Phase 1, Marvel presents Item 47.
always said that we deserve better, right?
So to that end, two hotties sit in a car debating if they should do a thing. The dude says, maybe not, but the girl says, definitely so. So they pull some ski masks over their heads, drag along a massive space laser gun, and rob a bank. Cut to some sort of shield office or whatever, and a guy explains that these two are robbing a bunch of banks, which is crazy because it's less than a week after the single greatest tragedy America has ever faced. And then the bald dude named, again, Sitwell from The Counselor.
You're talking about the
No, I'm not.
Comes in and is like, I'll catch him. Cut again to a hotel room where the two hotties are about to bang.
Yeah, okay.
But alas, the next door music is too loud, which wilts her lady boner. So the dude goes over there to tell them to shut up, but twist! Sitwell is in there. They fight, but eventually the woman figures out what's going on and just starts blasting holes in the wall with the laser cannon. Until she too is somehow neutralized by Sitwell. Sitwell ties them up, but he mostly just wants to know how they got the gun to work in the first place, because of the other 46 alien weapons they've discovered, none of them are functional. But this random dude figured it out, so they hire him to reverse engineer some alien tech, and they hire her to be a crappy assistant.
Do you know how to make coffee?
No.
Everybody wins.
Alright, so here's the deal. I was never going to give you a budget. You're just gonna have to kidnap a visual effect artist's family or something and force them to do it for free.
I can do that, I guess.
Looking forward to the final results.
Oh, they'll be awful.
No, I don't doubt it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just don't know that the plot of this video is as coherent as the Beernado one.
Well, my wife just had her third kid, so things got a little rough.
No, I hear you. I just I wish it was a little more fleshed out.
Totally understand. The next one will involve a lot of flesh.